Hi there, everyone out there in Formula One world, wherever you are. It's not a great time right now for North America, and not a brilliant time for Europe probably, because I'm sure everybody's hard at work. It's 12:30 CET, 12:30 in Spain. But nonetheless, I'm sure we'll have some viewers from the other side of the globe, maybe Australia, Asia, around there, and the usual suspects as well, from any part of the world. So welcome to the live stream. This will be the last one we'll do before the US Grand Prix in Austin this weekend. Everybody currently en route to Austin, Texas, where Eminem and Sting are playing in the concert there. It should be quite fun. And as you might have seen on I think I did it on Community and YouTube, but I got to know Sting reasonably well for a short period of time back in the 80s when he was in concert in Milan, or when we were testing at Monza, when I was at Williams, and he was staying at the same hotel as us, or were we staying at the same hotel as him? I can't remember which way around it was. Anyway, just if you hadn't seen the story, we were chatting, we got back, usual thing, 8, 9 o'clock or whatever, and we were in the bar just prior to going out to dinner, and Dickie and Brian Lambert and a few others, and Sting was sitting there at the bar with a couple of his mates, and we were talking about Formula One and this and that and testing and how it was going. And he kind of came up and said, "Oh wow, that's really, you guys running it at Monza right now?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, I'd love to come and watch. I've got a concert tomorrow night. Can I come out with you guys tomorrow morning?" So I said, "Yeah." And I think we said, 7:30 departure or something ridiculous, never expecting it. And there he was in the lobby, ready to go, wearing his Miami University baseball cap. And had a great day with him. Lovely guy, very cool guy. And good sprinter when he was at school, athletic, immediately understood Formula One. I mean, I introduced him to Ayrton. He bonded with Ayrton straight away, and a few of the other drivers, Michele, and I got Michele to take him for a lap of the circuit in a 328. And he just loved it. And then we drove back, and yeah, mega. Anyway, that was it. That was Austin, and he's now back at Austin in concert. So good luck. Hope that concert goes well for him. And it should be a good Grand Prix, I think. Well, it will be. It's not to me, Austin's always been a slightly difficult circuit to understand, because there are lots of great looking corners, but not lots of great corners, if you get my gist. Quite sure why that is. I think because most of the great corners there are approached from fairly short straights and not at high enough speed. I mean, that certainly applies to the long right-hander towards the end of the lap, which is sort of triple apex, supposedly modelled on Turkey in reverse. But the approach speed's not enough for it to be truly demanding, in my opinion. The approach to the hairpin is far too wide, thanks to Michael Schumacher. He said, that's the way to get more overtaking, 3 abreast into the hairpin. So it's a very wide entry, so they can do whatever they like going in there. The best part of the lap, in my opinion, is after you go up to the hairpin, which is a spectacular corner. But again, there's a lot of room there, that first hairpin. Then you come out of that, down through the right-hander, and then the next section of road there, through those fast change of direction S's. It's a little bit like Beckett's. Again, not the same approach speed. So, but nonetheless, you got a lift going in, so, or maybe even downshift. So it's a good bit of road, and it tightens up at the top of the hill. And at the top of the hill, it's quite narrow, relatively narrow. And so that's quite a precise, technical, should we say, piece of road. And that's about the best bit. We normally don't get great camera angles there, though, so it's difficult to tell exactly what everybody's doing, and it's very quick. So you blink and you miss it anyway. But that probably is the best part of the lap, I think, in terms of possibly isolating the very, very good from the very good, which is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, if you or I drove around Austin, what corners would we love? I'm talking about what makes the difference between, say, Max and Perez around Austin. And it would be those fast change of directions, I would bet. I can't imagine Perez is any worse than Max through the hairpin, through the left-hander at the end of the long back straight. It's all just about high-speed braking. Max may be slightly better there. And then you got that twiddly bit as well, and then the long right-hander. As I say, they're basically accelerating through there. Last two corners are you see a lot of people going off there and incidents, but it's more just, they shouldn't really, because they're the best drivers in the world, and it's all just about precise braking and entry points and feeling the grip level changes and things like that. Again, a Max or a Lewis, and probably a Charles, maybe even an Oscar, will be pretty good over the race distance if the track evolves, changes, the wind gets up, oil goes down. that's some of the things we do have in Austin, and that, as distinct from time management. And if we see those sorts of things happening, that's when, right at the back end of the weekend, that's when a Max or a Lewis might have some sort of advantage over a teammate. But going into qualifying, it's very, very difficult for a Max or a Lewis or a Charles to do a lot more, certainly than a Lando can do, or even a Carlos Sainz for that matter. So yeah, it's a spectacular venue. And I've always thought it was a little bit disappointing in that it's Austin, and yet it's not Austin. It's way out in the boonies, well, quite far out in the boonies, which is lovely. I love the boonies there, but it's not downtown Austin in the way that Dallas was downtown Dallas, or Phoenix was downtown Phoenix, and we had other great Detroit, very good example. Long Beach, another. So it's, yeah, I mean, Austin's a pretty funky city, isn't it, in terms of its university and its music and everything else, and yet you don't really get to touch and feel that, and other than at night. And who's around at night when you're at Formula One? If you're not at the track, you're asleep basically, maybe grabbing something quick to eat. So there we are. Anyway, we got a special interview in this show, which was born of the previous live stream last week, when I was talking about the plethora of young talented drivers who don't make it through to Formula One and don't have the right opportunity given to them to get into Formula One, even though they've obviously shown they have enormous talent. So I had a look around and rang a few friends, and I've always been impressed with this guy. I'll leave his name till we just put the interview up. I've always been impressed with him throughout this year anyway, and his track craft and his aggression, early laps, and how good he is, and he just drives really well too. And sure enough, he's not doing Formula One next year. So I mean, that's an interesting story, and he's a great guy. So stick with this, and we will get to him fairly shortly. I've been playing around with the exposure on this. It's not great, is it? I think it's a little bit bright, but I don't seem to be able to do anything about it at the moment. It's another thing, but I believe, unless I'm completely wrong, that our pop-up chat is now working. I think. Famous last words. Let's see if we can do it. There you go. This is the first question from AB. Not ABB, who sponsor Formula E. Every race should have 2 mandatory pit stops, as that adds uncertainties and makes the race, the championship, much more interesting. This needs to be done as soon as possible. And Ponting is the better batsman, Peter. Well, no doubt. You're coming to us live from Australia. And I never said that Steve was the better batsman. I said he was the guy that you could probably rely on more in the trenches, whereas Ponting was the classicist. And I would agree with you. In terms of classic technique, Ponting definitely had it over Steve Waugh. But in terms of, we got one guy we can choose. We are 7 for 89 with another 63 runs to get. Who would you bring out? I'd be quite happy to bring out Steve Waugh at that point. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, going back to the motor racing part of your question. Well, we certainly do have 2-stop strategies at various races, don't we? It's not all 1 stop. You're saying mandatory 2-stop. We sometimes have 3-stop strategies, don't we? What do I think about that? Well, I think it's, it's kind of, I suspect Pirelli have found the right balance between building the tyres that need to be used throughout Friday and Saturday and into qualifying, and then in the race, some of which become 2 or even 3 stops, some of which are 1 stop. And if you started building softer tyres because it was a mandatory 2-stop race, you may struggle. I suspect they may have to build more tyres to do as many laps as they do on Friday and Saturday. Does that sound right? I think they found the right ratio balance between the tyres they need to do the job over a 3-day weekend as distinct from just on race day. I think that's the answer. And again, it comes under the heading of making life as easy as possible, or as logical as possible for Pirelli, given the amount of money they do have to spend on Formula One, providing tyres, and the amount of abuse they get in return. And plus, obviously, trying to maximise their involvement anyway, with massive expenditure in the Paddock Club and circuit signage and advertising and so forth. So I think, yeah, I mean, we could all come up with a number of ideas of how to make the racing more interesting, closer. I mean, you're saying that. 1 second, just doing something here. I've got another live stream going on with on another platform at the moment, just filming what I'm doing here, just as an experiment, which should be quite interesting. But anyway, yeah, something just came up which distracted me. Sorry about that. No, I think you know, we need to be careful about what we want Pirelli to do, and indeed, if the uncertainty that you don't have and the championship walkover that you're talking about, if that is the fault of Pirelli, it's not. So why should they have to fix it? It's the fault of the rule makers who've come up with rules that for a while only Red Bull were able to interpret, and which now McLaren are doing the best job with, which is all multiplied by a cost cap budget restriction thing, which prevents teams like Ferrari and Mercedes, which historically would have been capable of designing 2 or 3 cars in 1 year just to get the right car, to copy whoever's doing well. That's all gone out the window. So the reason we are in, or have been in, a dominant situation with Red Bull, and why occasionally we have relatively straightforward, boring races, if that's what you want to describe them as, is not the fault of Pirelli. It's the fault of the rule makers. We had great racing before we even went down this path, you know, V10s, V8s, need I say it again? And yet it was all changed because Formula One had to be seen to be going, you know, green. And it's gone greenish, but it needn't have gone this way at all. Had Formula One done its own Formula E and made it part of the weekend package, and had a few Formula One drivers doing the Formula E races over the weekend or over the course of the year, none of this would be an issue. If we'd done everything logically, none of this would be an issue. So that's the problem with it all. And I don't see why Pirelli would need to fix it. It's not their issue. Sujith, hi Peter. Have you followed Antonio Fuoco's junior Formula career, now with the Le Mans trophy to his name with Ferrari? How was he in single-seaters? Yeah, I didn't really know him, but I remember going to Prema once, my friends at Prema, before the Italian Grand Prix, and Antonio was there, and we hung out a bit, and he was doing the gym stuff there, and I remember thinking, wow, this guy is a sort of latter-day Eugenio Castellotti. He's dead cool, and you know, he had all the trimmings with him, all the Italian trimmings that you'd want if you're an Italian racing driver walking into a pizza joint in Bologna Town Square on a Friday afternoon on your weekend off. You know, wow. He's that sort of guy, and yeah, he was quick. He was very quick. I thought another example of a driver. I think he could easily have. I mean, at least as good as Lance Stroll, obviously, and probably better, and could easily, if in the right team, in the right car, could have been right up there. But all credit to him, and all credit to Ferrari for staying with him and backing him and putting him into WEC the way they have, and for him for maximising that opportunity and becoming a sort of, you know, I'm not saying he's ever going to be a Tom Christensen, but I mean, you now associate him with very professional, polished WEC drives, and that's to his credit. You know, he's a professional racing driver now, makes money at it, and he can walk into the pizza joint in Bologna with a certain amount of dignity and say, yeah, I am Antonio Fuoco. So good. You know, what a great name too for a racing driver. Tony Fire in Americanese, and almost as good as Scott Speed. Tony Fire and Scott Speed. So yeah, good guy, and grew up in the whole Prema thing and drives well. Good question. Thank you. Aaron Lee, welcome to the show, Aaron, one of our stalwarts. Hi, Peter. Now that we have a budget cap, I'd like to see looser technical regulations. If you had to do this progressively, which part of the car would you start with? Would I start with? Wow. So we've got the budget cap, and within the budget cap, we've got looser technical regulations. What would I start with? Well, I'd need to talk to a few of my boffin friends to see how much various bits and bobs actually cost. But if it was left to me, I think I would go for, I'd certainly take more aero out of the car, but I would adopt active ride, because I think active ride is a brilliant thing. It just makes the car so quick and so good. And Formula One basically gave it to the automotive industry. The automotive industry have got it now to play with whenever they want, and we don't have it. And it's much, much cheaper to do active ride now than it ever would have been back in the early 90s when we had it at Williams. So that's one thing I'd do. I think I'd probably go back to H-pattern manual gear shifts, just so that there's a more, I think that would increase the overtaking much more than all these idiosyncratic little rule changes to try to make the car a little bit less affected by the turbulence from the car in front, the front wing performance, all that rubbish. I would go for going back to sequential manual gear changing and having a clutch pedal, because then you've got the opportunity to force a driver into an error on a downshift or an upshift. And that's how a lot of the overtaking used to take place in Formula One. And that's what we would get back, I'm sure of it. Everybody, when we went away from that, loved the idea that we're no longer going to blow up engines or destroy dog rings in gearboxes. But we're past that now. We've got the technology to prevent blow-ups. I'm not sure about dog rings, but I don't even know if they have dog rings anymore. But I do think that's one thing I would go for. Let me think, what else? Gearboxes. Cast iron brakes. I don't think it would make that much difference, actually. I'd stay with carbon brakes, I think. I'd just get less aero out of the car, make the wings smaller, probably quicker in a straight line. And I'd make it much more about mechanical issues rather than aero issues on the car. That's what I would do. But I don't know how much it would cost to do all that, you see. You're saying within the budget cap, that's the problem. So thanks for that. It's nice to sort of daydream for a while. Very nice, Aaron. Thank you very much. So here's another one. I am Tim. G'day, Tim. Hi, Peter. Thanks again for the live streams. Who do you think will win in Austin? I was dreading somebody asking that. As I say, I don't think it'll be a sort of, a masterclass from the best driver on the day. I think it'll be the team that gets it more or less right in terms of strategy. There will obviously be time management coming into it. I don't know. Oscar Piastri? Being relatively controversial, just to annoy Lando. I mean, there's no way Oscar Piastri is going to be slow around Austin in that McLaren, that is for sure. And he's the sort of guy that could adapt very well to late race variables, as often is the case in Austin, and he'll be there for that. Not saying Lando won't be as well. I just think, I can just sort of sniff it a little bit there. And let me think. Ferrari should be okay there, shouldn't they? Should be all right. George, you can see it being a sort of George is due for a win, isn't he? And Max. Difficult actually to imagine Max winning the Grand Prix this year. You can just imagine him sort of going out and being P1, P2 in FP1 after 10 minutes and then slowly going backwards, and by the time we get to the back end of qualifying, he's saying, even though the Red Bull looks brilliant on track, he's saying, the car's undrivable, bouncing everywhere, no turn-in, terrible. You can never see that with Max because he disguises it all so well. And then, you can see him getting beaten by the McLarens and maybe even having to race hard to beat the Ferraris around there. So, I don't know. Not really. I mean, if I had to put money down, I suppose I would only do it with a smile on my face thinking, well, what do I know? And I'd probably put it on Oscar, I think. Same questioner. I am Tim. I think it's a pivotal race as many are bringing upgrades, so depending on how those work, may well shake up the grid. Yeah, absolutely. And equally on how much money they've been able to spend on them, bearing in mind we're at the back end of 2024 and the budget cap's omnipresent, boringly so. And, what can they do for 25 anyway? I mean, if they knew what the answer was for 25, they would have done it by now, sort of thing. So I'm not convinced that all those, they've had 3 weeks, but I'm not convinced that those upgrades are necessarily going to be significant in terms of changing the overall pattern. And then and the upgrades are for the next 3 races in effect, aren't they? Because we've got 2 triple headers now, which is annoying as well. Mexico, long straights, thin air. You need your aero to be even more efficient. And then Brazil. No, is it Qatar? I can't remember. Anyway, we'll see. It's too many races, too many triple headers. Stephen Dobbins. Hi, Peter. How far back do you think Red Bull's wind tunnel correlation issues started? Do they have correlation issues? Okay. As early as 23, given Perez's struggles since the mid-23 upgrade? How does correlation go astray? See also Mercedes. I don't know. Who's saying they've got correlation? I think a lot of people are saying they love that, don't they? When the car's gone slowly, it's always a wind tunnel correlation. But there's nobody better than Adrian Newey to have got a wind tunnel sorted out and to ask the correct questions. Now, if Adrian left the Red Bull wind tunnel long before he decided to leave Red Bull, or actually left Red Bull, then maybe other engineers have gone in there and been asking too much of the tunnel. You're asking how does correlation begin? It begins by asking the wrong questions of the tunnel and not understanding what the tunnel can give you in return. That's how correlation problems begin. And then you also have other things. You have flow, you have boundary layer issues, you have speed of the inconsistency of speed of the belt, all those other issues come into play. But most teams are pretty much on top of that now. And I think correlation issues are a little bit like, writing a handling imbalance off as tire problems, tire temperature issues, or whatever. It's only scratching the surface of really where they're at. And Red Bull, in my opinion, and I'm still stand by this, did have some sort of asymmetric braking thing on the car at the start of the year, which they took off after the Chinese Grand Prix, and that's where we saw Perez particularly struggling in the semi-wet and wet in Melbourne, braking bringing to any corner in Melbourne. He just couldn't get the thing to work at all, because it's designed to be used as you're going into the corner slightly early, and Perez is never going to do that in the wet, never. He's always going to brake in a straight line, so he wasn't actually triggering the asymmetric valve, and that came off before Miami, and ever since then the car has been difficult to set up. Now that I may be completely wrong, and I'm totally open to saying, well, yeah, the Red Bull engineers who say this did not happen, and Peter's talking through his hat, I'm totally open to ultimately accepting that they are right and I'm wrong. But I don't think at the moment we have enough evidence to say whether it's right or whether I'm right or wrong. And certainly they would deny it right now, for sure. Why would they be open to acknowledging any of that? And so far as Red Bull goes, if it's not a thing to do with a specific thing like the asymmetric braking thing, I just think they started bouncing off the maximum they could do with that car, probably with the RB19, and they just looked at a couple of areas where they can go a little bit better, maybe saved a bit of weight, and it's probably a quicker car. Everybody's saying it's not as good a car, but it's probably slightly quicker than a 19. It's just that so far as they were concerned, they'd been hitting the wall of the performance level of these regulations from about mid-2022, and whereas McLaren, coming from further back, were able to look at a couple of other areas, the way the bricks were laid in other parts of the wall at the end of this regulatory period, and that applies to Ferrari and Mercedes as well. So they've just lost their sweet spot, and I don't think they'll get it back, but I do think they've got a quick enough car to win a Grand Prix before the end of the year, another Grand Prix before the end of the year. That's about all you can say. Seema Dragon. Hi Peter, hi chat. Yeah, hi there. Thank you very much, Seema. Edwin Schroten. Will Toyota boost Haas their performance? Yeah, I think they will. I can't see how there's any negative to this Toyota tie-up from Haas's point of view. Certainly manufacturing processes and the streamlining of the design processes in Haas to the manufacturing process that are going to be provided by Toyota will be even better than those with Dallara, I would have thought. And there will be an overlap as well. And they've got the 2 wind tunnels at Cologne, which won't hurt them. And they've got a lot of potential to use a lot of depth of engineering from the Toyota road car company. Oops, budget cap. Yeah, right. So I think in any dimension, it's going to be an opportunity for Haas to develop even more. So it's pretty scary. And as I keep saying, I'm pretty surprised that more of the other midfield teams, or any of the midfield teams around Haas, aren't complaining to the FIA about this. Because if you take Williams as a good example, they design and build the car in-house. Obviously they have outside suppliers, but they don't use another company apart from Mercedes to supply the engine and other bits and a bit of technology maybe. But that's it. And that's about what you would expect of Formula One's DNA, which is that you design and build your own car. But here's Haas, which are basically just a race team with a design office, using Toyota and Dallara for manufacturing, and Ferrari for power units and powertrain. So, you know, if I was Williams doing all this single-handedly, if you like, I'd be saying, let's get back to what we're supposed to be doing in these regulations. And maybe they don't do that because they think, oh, well, you know, maybe we'd like to try and get the same deal. We'll try and get a deal with Hyundai or whatever. And maybe that's why they don't do it. But to me, Formula One needs to look at that, because I don't in any way wish ill for Haas. I don't at all. But I do think it's odd that in this era of Formula One teams being prototype companies, designing and building their own cars, as Andretti would have to if they came in, that here we got Gene Haas basically running, you know, a production car built by Dallara and Toyota with a Ferrari engine. Seems so odd to me. But I seem to be the only guy saying that. I don't know why. Reto Hannah. Hi, Peter. Regarding the real pinnacle of motorsport, do you think Terry Neuville will win the World Rally Championship this weekend? Wow. Thank you very much, Reto. Referring, of course, to the World FIA World Rally Championship, Drivers' Championship, which and Co-Drivers' Championship, to give fairness to Martin Vajgada. I think that's how you pronounce his name, Vajgada, something like that. Terry could clinch the Drivers' Championship. This is the penultimate round. The last round is in Japan. And it's his home rally, if you like. He loves tarmac as well, mainly tarmac roads. Czech Republic, Austria, Germany. Loves those roads, loves this rally. And I don't know if you saw the interview that I did with him. If you haven't, have a look, because it's talking to Terry Neuville, rally driver. It's also talking to an unbelievably talented racing driver who just is so good at everything he does. And the way he even thinks, you get a feel for how he thinks as well in that interview, I think. And he just, when I talked to him about the Central European Rally, which is the title of the rally this weekend, bit of a mouthful, he just uses the phrase, yeah, well, we just got to get the job done. Gets his job done. If we get his job done in the CER, we'll be okay in Japan, because then I can focus on the constructors in Japan. And that's what he's going to do, get the job done. I don't know, when things look so in place, don't they? Motorsport has a great habit of everything falling apart, in which case, you know, his nearest rival is his teammate Ott Tanak, and Ott is very, very quick. So, and it's a difficult situation for Hyundai because they had to be very visible. And I asked him about that in the interview. And, you know, imagine if it's Max and Perez. There's no real similarity. The better similarity would be Max and Lewis in the same team, and they're both in the running for the championship, driving for the same team. That would be where we're at right now. And so it's difficult. But I think knowing Terry, knowing Martin, I think he will just, obviously it's a cliche, step by step, day by day, but I think there are so many things going on in rallying, so many things you have to be on top of. The weather, the road conditions, do you know the road well enough? Are there any issues that you need to think about if the weather goes sideways? Tyre choice, suspension, all the rest of it that you have to work on. There are so many different segments to it that he probably doesn't have time to take a bigger picture of it and just taking it every 10-second, 10-minute sort of gap, 10-minute segment, one after the other. That's how you'd have to approach it. But for sure, he'll be very quick. And for sure, there'll be a massive amount of jubilation if he does win it. I saw, if you go to his Instagram, I see that the Neuville family won the World or European Autocross Championship last week as well. Terry's got this great thing with his brother, Yannick. It's called Live Life, or Life Live, something like that. .be or underscore, yeah, .be. And you have a look at it, because it's an amazing facility, I guess somewhere where he lives in Belgium, near the Belgian-German border. And he's got a nearby track, and they've got rally cars you can actually rent and enter into a WCR2 event if you want to, a Toyota, I think. And they've got classic rally cars. He's got a lovely BMW M3. And then they've got all these amazing things that look a little bit like autocross cars, with lots of power, quite small wheels, sort of scaffolding type chassis. And these things are just sideways everywhere. And the Neuvilles love it. Anything to go sideways, they do it. Speaking of which, I was reading through another Instagram last night from Australia about go-kart racing, kart racing on dirt, and how big that is in Australia now. I'm not sure how big it is in Europe, but if not, it should be, shouldn't it? I think it's much cheaper than the sort of way you do it at the moment on tarmac, because of the circuits, obviously much cheaper to run and everything else. And the karts look about the same, but they're sliding a lot more. It's great. I've got to have a go in one of those. They said it's from everybody from 12 to 70 or something. Well, it counts me out, doesn't it, of course. Anyway, I might have a go at that at some point. BNNT. Hi Peter, do you think sim racing has become the next level thing each driver needs to have, similar to how MSC brought fitness to a new level in the 90s? Well, here I am talking about karting on the dirt and Terry Neuville sliding around in a Hyundai i20N doing handbrake turns. And so I have to say no, I don't. And I say no to that question because I think sim racing obviously plays a very important part of a racing driver's background in terms of trackcraft, hand-eye coordination, and other things. But the one thing, regardless of how good a sim, even the best sims of the Formula One teams, regardless of how good the sim is, to date, they cannot simulate the tiny gaps between the milliseconds of dynamic load change that makes a Max Verstappen, that enables a Max Verstappen's manipulation to be different from that of Sergio Perez. These are tiny, tiny things that a simulator could never, ever encompass. And that's, I guess, in a way, if you're born with the God-given talent of a Max or a Lewis or a Charles or others, maybe even an Oscar, Lando maybe, George, then you're quite happy that sim racing has become the big deal, because a lot of people with less talent will think, yeah, I've got it, I can do it, blah, blah, blah. And they're sort of locked into these landline things, and they're quite open entries to the corners and get the power on nice and smoothly and change the direction here. But none of it adds up to anything when it's one lap to go, you're on a new set of soft tyres, you're currently P10, you know the car's got a pole lap in it, and there are 3 cars in front of you which may or may not be going to slow your lap down, and you've got to go out and get the pole. That's where sim racing does not help you at all. It's all to do then with the brain becoming completely devoid of emotion and being able to rely completely on the physical structure that your body has engendered around the manipulation of dynamic weight. And that manipulation of dynamic weight is not something that you can recreate or replicate on any sim game or on any simulator. So that's why I don't think, I mean, a lot of people would say yes, but I don't think it is. I think that if you never did any sim and you started on Terry Neuville's autocross car and you were just sideways everywhere learning your car control and learning handbrake turns, and you were learning on a H-pattern gearbox how to have completely seamless Ayrton Senna-like up and down changes, perfect heel and towing, and from there you went to kart racing on tarmac, and then you went to Formula 4, I think you'd be just as successful if you had the basic natural talent to be successful, and you could do the whole thing without sim at all. Obviously there's a point where the technology on the steering wheel and the other procedures in running the car are best accomplished by getting into a sim and having the steering wheel and being able to do all those things without thinking. That's an obvious point. We're not talking about that though. We're talking about actually driving the car on the physical limit. And so that's where I mean, the only thing I'd say is that Rob Wilson is developing with various people, and Porsche already a big client, a vest which does simulate as best as possible a Rob Wilson type lap, which can be activated via a head-up display or vibrations or whatever, and colors. And that is something that is, if you're slightly too aggressive in coming out of the brake pedal pressure, if you've got this amount of understeer, then a red light will come on. But it's still not perfect, obviously, but it's certainly the best thing out there. Better than a sim, I would say, definitely. Jez James. Hi Peter, do you think Formula One will ever get back to making one's hairs stand on end? I'll never forget the sound and spectacle of Senna and Nigel at Monaco in '87. Each gear change was like an explosion. Well, there you go. I was just talking about proper gear changing and use of the foot clutch and the brakes pedal, half the brake pedal, well, half the foot on the brake pedal, heel and towing, and perfect downshifting, perfect upshifting. Both drivers absolutely at the top of their profession in that respect. And yeah, 87, even more probably than the 92 thing, where Nigel was much quicker in the 14B and was just being held up by Etten on that last lap, and Etten doing a good job of just shutting the gate everywhere. But 87 was Nigel at his absolute best in that Williams FW11B Honda. probably detuned about 950 horsepower for the race. Now, I'm exaggerating, probably about 800. But, you know, all just coming through the rear wheels, wheel spin in third, fourth gear, probably coming out of the chicane, and just blasting away with the race. And didn't win it. I mean, that's the race he should have won more than. Well, he should have won 92 as well, and 87. But 87, an exhaust manifold cracked. And bearing in mind it's a turbo engine, you lose the exhaust gas through a cracked manifold and you've lost all your engine power. So Nigel retired after about 15, 20 laps, I think it was. And it turned out that Honda, it's where you got to watch Honda. Honda, without telling Patrick Head, had gone thinner on the gauge of the exhaust manifold. I'm not, you know, I'm only guessing, but if it was, you know, if it was 8 gauge, they went to 11 gauge just to save weight, and the lighter gauge manifold couldn't stand the heat and cracked. Patrick, as you can imagine, went ballistic when he found out, and things kind of improved after that in terms of the relationship. Well, not the relationship, in terms of the exchange of knowledge, should we say, between Honda and Williams. I think that was a absolute pivotal moment of making sure that we know everything that Honda have got planned in the future. Capital E, underlined 47 times. So yeah, Nigel lost that race, but yeah, he and Ayrton just fabulous. I mean, Ayrton Active Ride, was it Active Ride Lotus? I think it was, yeah. And yeah, very, very. I mean, Ayrton, I've said it before, but I'll repeat it because maybe not everybody knows this, but Ayrton never liked, when he was downshifting, say from 6th gear down to a 1st gear hairpin, he never liked to jump a gear. He always went through every gear on the downshift, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And every downshift was perfectly judged in terms of brake application and rev synchronization. And he was just heel and toeing, what we call heel and toeing, with half the foot on the brake and just blipping the throttle exactly the right amount for every downshift. Whereas virtually every other driver I ever knew did at some point, well, I have to say in the past tense because we don't have manual gear shifts anymore, would jump a gear, would go maybe 5, 4, 2 or 5, 4, 3, 1, something like that. Gilles particularly used to love putting it into 1st or 2nd at the last moment, just get the back end to lock and do a Terry Neuville. But I asked Ayrton why he did that, and he just said he can't drive the car any other way. He has to feel completely in sync and in harmony with the car. And part of that is the downshifting and the upshifting has to be perfect in terms of every rev and every movement he made on the gear shift and all the pedal positioning. And he said, you know, he said it'd be like playing a wrong note in a piano if I'd missed a gear, if I deliberately missed a gear on a downshift sequence. Don't think Nigel was that pedantic, but Nigel was very good on dog rings and basic management of the gearbox and the clutch. Excellent. Stephen Parker. Hi, Peter. Have you got a GOAT top 5? Nah. Stephen, I'm not very good at these over a long period of time because there are so many great drivers, and whatever top 5 you come up with, there'll be somebody who should be in there that you'd feel the klutz not including. So, you know, you can do it for various, maybe 10-year periods over the history of Formula One, but certainly not over the complete history of Formula One. And I'm purely from a passionate point of view and a point of view of respect for humanity, ethics, athleticism, and sheer physical talent. I would put Jim Clark still as my personal greatest racing driver of all time. Great, encompassing his humility, his sportsmanship, his softness of touch, his love of motorsport, and his single-minded approach to racing and disregard and dislike, if you like, for fame and glory and money. Those things were not in any way important to him when it came to getting into a racing car. So that's what I loved about Jim Clark. And I was lucky enough as a kid in Australia to see him drive and to get to know him a little bit and chat to him. And all those things just were instilled in my being forevermore, talking to Jimmy. And And so, yeah, I would put Clark number one, but I'd have a great problem, I think, with everybody else. I would probably put Sterling second, but then, I may be doing a disservice to Tazio Nuvolari or Achille Vazzi or Bernd Resmar or Alberto Ascari or Georges Boillot or any number of Boillot, I think, excuse the French pronunciation, or any number of other drivers, obviously 20th century, 21st century. So it's about as much I can give you is what I feel about Jim Clark, that's all. But that's not in any way to disparage other great drivers. I mean, how could you say Fangio wasn't as good as anybody that's ever lived on the planet Earth? And so, how could you say Michael wasn't? How could you say Lewis or Max aren't? You can't. They're all different eras, different times, and 5 is certainly far too small a number. 55 maybe I could do. Kevin Pryor, morning Peter. Yeah, well, we kind of know what part of the world you're in then, Kevin. I guess it's Europe. I know you were on the BBC documentary about Lauda versus Hunt 76. Did you know Hunt very well, and why did he stop racing in F1? Turn 1 at Austin could be key for Max v Norris battle. Okay. Yeah, I knew James pretty well, actually. And I got to know him better and better as our relationship developed, if that's the right way. I didn't know him very well in Formula 3. Well, I wasn't around then. When I first came to Europe, he was in the Dassel Formula 3 car that Bubbles Horsley had been running. And that was his sort of entree to the Hesketh operation. And then, as we know, he went really well in that private Hesketh in 74, 75 and earned himself a McLaren Formula 1 drive when Emerson Fittipaldi at the last minute decided to leave McLaren and do his own team, Copersucar, the Brazilian team, which left the door open. And there was James suddenly in Emerson's seat, putting the car on pole for his first Grand Prix in Brazil. That was impressive, actually, Interlagos. So, yeah, I mean, I always thought James was a very fast racing driver. Fast in the truest sense of the word. Blindingly fast, to the point where if you were watching on the outside of Woodcote at Silverstone, you'd think, oh, here's James. You just take a step back, just one step back. And there's Ronnie, 2 steps back, that sort of thing. James was incredibly articulate and intelligent, as you would expect a Wellington College educated Englishman. I always felt that had he been 21 in 1940, he would have been an ace Spitfire pilot, no doubt about that. But I remember talking to him quite a lot about the technique of driving, and he once said, "Oh, apex to exit. My grandmother could do that. There's nothing clever about that at all. Bit of opposite lock here, bit of opposite lock there. It's getting to the apex. That's the difficult thing." And he was absolutely right. And he set that sort of stayed with me. And I've often thought, yeah, he was absolutely on the knuckle there. And he was good into corners. He definitely wasn't an open the corner wide, late turn-in driver. He was pretty early. Not Jacques Lafitte, not Carlos Reutemann, not Nicky, but he was, Lando Norris-ish and very fast. Very, very fast. The thing about James was that he actually was incredibly nervous and used to get into great states before a race, literally throwing up sometimes. And obviously he was a smoker, and smoking did a lot for him in terms of calming the old nerves. I remember chatting to him before the 76 Canadian Grand Prix on the grass by the pits before the cars were going out onto the grid, and we were just sitting there chatting away. And it was a big weekend, obviously, because he'd just heard that he'd lost the British Grand Prix to Nicky and had changed things around for him in terms of the point situation with Nicky. And he was quick in Mosport, but others were quick too. The 6-wheel Tyrrells were particularly good that day. Nicky wasn't there, obviously. And we were chatting away, and we were talking about we talked a little bit about driving and what this circuit was like, and he thought it was quite spooky and usual thing. He was quite, I wouldn't say scared is the wrong word, but he was definitely very aware of how dangerous Formula One was. And I remember him saying, for me, I'm a bundle of nerves, but then I put the helmet on, put the old crash hat on, and the minute I lower the visor, that is when it all stops, and I become James Hunt, racing driver. I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And he used to get in the car, sort of one foot standing in front of the other, like a runner before a long distance run, with these orange Marlboro overalls. And that's how he'd put on his balaclava and his helmet. It was almost like he was getting into a running pose, and he'd do it like that, and then he'd get in the car. And we were chatting away. Speaking of Spitfire pilots, we were chatting away, and suddenly he looked at his watch. He said, "Goodness, is that the time? I must get my man to start my engine." And I remember thinking, it's a bit like, I must get my man to start to flick the old prop on the Spitfire. And he went off and won the race. Really good use of traffic. Unbelievably good. I mean, that was classic James Hunt in the days before GPS and radio signals, and about, impeding another car, lapping other slower cars was part of the job, and doing that well, as Sterling Moss proved, was a real art. And James was exceptionally good at that as well, because he had that sort of British public school brain of how actually you can imagine as a rugby player, he would have been very good at working out the move as distinct from just being aggressive. He would have been thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead, and that's what he did on the racetrack extremely well. He was a junior Wimbledon standard tennis player as well. Very good athlete, but he drank and he smoked, and he enjoyed his life. He loved his life. Finally, why did he stop? Oh, I think he just ran out of steam. The 77 McLaren M28 was not a great car. It was more of an understeerer than the M23, sorry. M26 was the 77 car. The M23 was a very well balanced car, and Goodyear stiffened up the sidewalls of their tires for the 76 season, much to Niki Lauda's chagrin, and it perfectly suited the McLaren. It was a great car. And I think James, when the 77 car came along, he found it a little bit more difficult to drive, a bit understeery and a bit sort of twitchy and not as comfortable. And he kind of realized that racing was he didn't realize, he just continued to know racing was unbelievably dangerous, and that he had lots of other things he wanted to do in his life and have fun, not the least of which was doing commentary with Murray Walker. So I think it was that, he just didn't really enjoy his racing too much after that. There was a potential comeback, but never really happened. And then he did some other good stuff. Didn't he win the Rally of Britain or Round Britain thing with Andy Marriott in a Camaro, I think? If not, he was very quick on that. And he was very good in Formula 3, obviously very good in Atlantic, and just a fast racing driver. What can I say? Very fast racing driver. And then finally, Turn 1, key for the Max Norris battle. Well, it will be. It's pretty wide there, isn't it? It's not as if it's a tiny little funnel of love. It's all, it's wide. Yeah, there'll be some fisticuffs there for sure. Max doesn't need a DNF, does he? He doesn't need to be nerfed off at the first corner, because that will start to put a lot of pressure on them. I can't imagine Red Bull are going to win Mexico, given the way they are. So the pressure could build up then. But it would be more pressure if they hadn't taken all these points away from Lando. 27 points, I think we worked out, didn't he? That he could be in addition to where he is right now. Ayush Kulkarni. Hi, Peter. Do you remember how Carlos Reutemann got support from back home in Argentina compared to how Franco is being supported widely today? Yeah, Carlos had a lot of support, and the government did a good job for Carlos. There was a Formula 2 team in 1970 run by Hector Staffer, which did have EPF, YPF, government petroleum oil funding, and Carlos drove for that in 70 and 71. It was quite clearly the fastest of the Argentine drivers. Benedicto Caldarella and Carlos Reusch, I think, were his teammates. And he then, when he came into Formula One, he had continued to have EPF, and then he had Argentina 75, was it? The World Cup thing, that was a government thing as well on his helmet. And he always had quite a lot of local sponsors on his overalls anyway, to help him cement the drive that he was trying to get in Formula One. So yeah, there was a massive amount of interest and support for Carlos. Noel was a good example. I remember going to the Noel factory with Carlos one year. It was a chocolate factory from memory, and Carlos was there trying a few chocolates and so forth. So yeah, I'm no surprise that Franco's getting the same sort of support, because the Argentines just love it. And I've often spoken about how the flags and the grass and the white picket fences at Warwick Farm and the blue sky and the Lotus 32B, green and yellow on the grass in the paddock, and Jim Clark standing there with no shirt on and beige slacks, there's an atmosphere to that which I can't actually describe, which I've never managed to recreate at any stage of my motor racing life. And there was also an atmosphere of driving with Carlos from his hotel, the Canal Grande, I think, in Buenos Aires, to the track on qualifying or race day, the Parque Almirante Brown. Carlos in his Fila shirt, reading Claddin newspaper, his mate Richard Wilmot driving the car, me in the back seat, the sunshine again, the people cheering as the car went through when they realized that was Carlos sitting in the car, driving into the circuit, the crowd rushing towards the car, Carlos waving in the little, it was a Fiat 132 or something like that, and just driving up to the pit area there in the sunshine. Again, that is a little part of my life that, again, I cannot describe it any more than I have, just in words, but inside me there is something which was a spark which I've never again recreated anywhere else, and it's different from the spark in Australia. It was a different one. This is the Buenos Aires one, slightly different smells, scents. The grass was slightly different, whatever it was, I don't know, the beer smell in the big grandstand areas, whatever it was, there was something slightly different, but it was still absolutely magical. And yeah, I'll never forget those days. And seeing, usually it was the first time we'd seen the cars that year, and in the case of the Ferrari, for example, it would be looking at the new font on the side, Carlos Reutemann on the side of the T3 Ferrari, or things like that, tiny details that mattered so much, and being in the hot sun, and there's Patrick Depailler, and look, hey Jody, how you doing? And it's just, the whole thing was so good, and I love that. I remember Ken Tyrrell said that the Buenos Aires Sheraton was his all-time favorite hotel. And I said, why, Ken? He said, the trading ships that are usually moored there in the little harbour outside, and wake up in the morning, the smell of the coffee and the breakfast and the whole, I just love the Buenos Aires Sheraton. I did too. It's a great hotel. I remember one year arriving in the Sheraton and checking in, and Carlos was on the right side of the lobby with a sort of 9 Argentine journalists around him, all sort of kneeling or with chairs, and he was on the sofa thing on the side of the lobby, and he was suntanned, and again the Fila shirt, and I think it was Sergio Tacchini by then from memory, and I just thought, wow, this guy's a star. This is the center of the world right here. I was thinking about it actually with this whole business of Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy coming into Formula One for a 10-year deal. And I'm thinking to myself, bling, bling, bling. But actually Carlos had a really, really nice, large, but it wasn't Louis Vuitton, it was Gucci. Large bag, I mean, you can't see it. It was the length of my desk here. He used to put over his shoulder, and that's where he kept his overalls and stuff and helmets when he went to and from the track every day. And it was a Gucci, quite a battered Gucci one. So Louis Vuitton, eat your heart out. Gucci is the thing, as Carlos Reutemann proved. But that was the only thing he had of Gucci. That was quite funny. Everything else was a freebie from Tacchini or Nike or whatever. And but speaking of the Sheraton, I remember going back to James Hunt. I remember queuing up in the coffee shop at the Sheraton one year, and we were all testing. They were testing, it was like a Wednesday or a Thursday or something for the race. And we were all lining up, and James was in front of me, trying to get a table in the coffee shop for breakfast. And the phone rang by the till. And picture this time, this is well before the internet, and there's all these lovely Argentine waitresses and so forth around. The phone's ringing, so James picks up the phone and says, "Good morning, Buenos Aires coffee shop, Sheraton Hotel speaking." Sorry, hola. James Hunt. So, Sabotage Design says slightly over, I'd say. I'm not quite sure what that means. Kevin Pryor, bring back refueling. Call me British blessed, but I think Norris can be as good as Piastri. He's still the lead McLaren in the title standings, and he absolutely hammered everyone in Singapore. Yeah, absolutely. As you probably gather, I'm a big Norris fan, have been ever since his Formula 3 days, and love to see him 27 points further up the table than he is. No, I think, yeah, of course he can do it. I just got a sniff that, this could be an Oscar weekend. That's all. I don't know why. Probably won't happen. Bring back refueling. Not sure about that. As I said, it was a bit messy, and it's a massive thing for all the teams. Imagine doing triple header now, 2 triple headers with refueling as well. All those FIA refueling rigs, trying to keep them all identical. One of them has slightly faster fuel pressure flow than the other and decides the world championship. Michael Massey, eat your heart out. No, I think there's too much room for error there, and also it's dangerous. And also, I don't think Formula One wants to be seen putting fuel in the cars anymore, does it? It wants to be seen, I don't know, charging them. USB-C charge point, doesn't it? That's what it's all about. Sadly. QSG drivers Warren. Hi Peter, thanks for sharing your thoughts even in these days with everything going on about your mum. Very appreciated, every single video watched. Thank you so much, it's very kind. Yeah, well, my mum did pass away very peacefully on Saturday morning, and we were all there. And the doctors were absolutely amazed that 1 week after suffering a stroke, she hung on for that long. She never regained consciousness, but she hung on just short of her 103rd birthday. And no medication was ever given, and she was just strong, and then she passed on to the next world. And thank you so much for everybody's thoughts and kindness. Fabian Gonzalez. Hi Peter, Red Bull are rumoured to be bringing a McLaren style front wing along with the other upgrades. Do you think that Red Bull will be as fast as McLaren? In my experience, copying front wings of other quick cars never ever produces a result, particularly if you've got a different car to everybody else anyway. Excuse me, I've just got to do this thing here. This thing seems to have stopped. Here we go. Right, I think we're still, I don't know if we're live on this thing or not. Possible to tell. Can't see anything. Anyway, carry on. Forget about that. So I doubt it's as simple as, oh, well, that's what McLaren have got. Let's put it on the Red Bull and we'll be as quick as a McLaren. I'm sure Red Bull, like everybody, is playing with front wings throughout the year, floor throughout the year, strakes throughout the year, all those aero appendages, things that teams play with all the time. So a lot will be made of if the latest Red Bull wing looks like a McLaren wing. But to me, you've got to look at the complete car and the total airflow, and just doing what another team does is never going to work. But I don't know. We'll see. Based on where we're at the moment, it's hard to imagine Red Bull being as quick as a McLaren around Austin, I've got to say. Maybe, it's just hard to imagine it. Maybe there will be. Who knows? Kevin Pryor again. Hi, Kevin. Want to make a big shout out to Jake Hill, who won the 2024 BTCC title. Do you follow BTCC, Peter? Big shout out to Jake Hill. Well done to Jake. And no relation to Damon or Graham, but nonetheless, good name, good racing name. Or Phil for that matter, I guess. Good. Do I follow BTCC? Not really. My problem with BTCC is that it's very close, I think, and there's quite a lot of, lead changes and stuff. But the cars themselves appear to be too much on rails for me, for what I expect a touring car to be like. I want to see a touring car with the inside front wheel off the ground, not when it's going over a curb, but going around a normal corner, and with at least 25 degrees of front or rear axle sliding going on. In other words, like a rally car. That's why I love rallying, because I spend enough time watching cars go around on rails in Formula One. I just need to see them over the limit of tire adhesion, if you like. And I like to see the skill of drivers like Neuville and Tanak and Ogier and Formeau and those guys. And that is that's why I love rallying. To me, it's all a bit, I'm probably not bright enough to understand BTCC. I don't really understand weight penalties. I don't really understand massively close racing. And I can't really make head or tail of it when they're all going around on rails. But I have to say, Aussie V8 racing is a bit like the same thing. But I know a lot of people like it. And congrats to the championship runners there and the promoters. They've done a great job, but it's just not my scene, really. I see that Jake Hill used Goodyear tyres winning the BTCC. Can you see Goodyear coming back? I think Goodyear are very good at keeping their hand in a motorsport in the lower categories, but categories below Formula One, that is. But I think it was a huge ask for them to do what Pirelli are doing, the amount of money Pirelli spend. I just can't see them doing that. That's why they got out, because they didn't have the money to do it and they couldn't justify it. So I don't think they will. They've ruined Austin with the sprint BS. Yeah, well, we didn't talk about that. I tried to avoid any reference to that. So I'm not a fan of sprint racing, just like you, and it's kind of annoying, but it's just part of life, like speed bumps, really, isn't it? CNC thematic sounds interesting. Peter, do you enjoy Sector 1 of Austin as much as me? Yeah, as I said, I mean, that Sector 1 is the best part of the lap, for sure. Quite difficult to see it close up and personal, but it is definitely the best part of the lap in terms of asking a lot from the drivers and getting it absolutely right. Nice super chat here from Matthew Brown. Thank you, Matthew. Do you think Red Bull have had enough time to work out the balancing issues with the RB20 in time to give Max a chance to attack? Because this is, in my opinion, will decide if Max stays at Red Bull. I think it will definitely be in the back of his mind if they don't actually make any improvements at all and he's still struggling to beat Ferrari and Mercedes and can't beat McLaren. I definitely think it will be there in his mind. But this Max staying at Red Bull business still has to be seen in the correct context, doesn't it? Which is, what are we saying? That he's very unimpressed with Red Bull ever since Adrian left and he's not happy at all. He's going to change for 2025. Where's he going to go? You know, there's nowhere to go. So we're talking 2026 at the earliest. And as I've made the point several times, nobody, Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, nobody knows how the cars are going to be in 2026 until, guess what? 2026 happens. So the earliest really Max could actually make a change, unless he wanted to take a massive gamble, would be 2027. If the 26 Red Bull Ford is a dog of a car, and let's say Aston Martin have got it absolutely right, he's going to try and get into an Aston Martin for sure for 2027. But that's a long way away, isn't it? Bearing in mind most racing people only think about 3 months ahead. It's a long way ahead to be thinking in terms of his future being affected by how the car goes in Austin this weekend. But yeah, I mean, I think the Red Bull will be a better car now than it was a month ago, and a month ago it was a better car than it was 4 months ago. But it doesn't mean to say it'll be as good as a McLaren, which also will be a bit better now than it was even in Singapore, I suspect. So maybe a bit lighter. They may be able to do a few other things, stiffen it up in a couple of areas. Every team will be improving for Austin. So, and we'll see more changes and improvements incrementally before this race than we've seen for a long time because of the amount of time that's been there. But having said that, everybody's in the same situation. So again, it's kind of difficult to see the pattern changing dramatically. Kevin Pryor also says Austin could open up the driver's title and all this Ricciardo helping his best made out thing will disappear. Yeah, you know, Daniel's been very dignified, hasn't he, in his effectively retirement from Formula One, and it's kind of sad. And the whole thing, ultimately, if it wasn't for Oscar Piastri moving to McLaren, Daniel would still be at McLaren and probably would have done a very good job alongside Lando. And Lando arguably might have more points as a result. I have said that. So it's not as if it would have been a disaster had they kept Daniel Ricciardo. And he's a good guy to have around Formula One wise. He's a nice guy. He represents Formula One very well. And he has done a very professional job over the years. So it's his place being taken by Liam Lawson in the V carb team, and so it's it's a bit of a funny weekend, that one, isn't it? Creative expression by Dion. Peter, you made a suggestion in your last stream that was absolutely brilliant that I truly wish would come to being. Take Formula One cars from every Formula from team 2 years ago and have a series of all rookies. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it's so annoying to me that we don't have that, and that Formula One half-heartedly adopted my suggestion and tried to put on a rookie race at the end of the year run by the current teams with the same personnel, and it was never ever going to happen. Just to give the rookie drivers a chance. You want to have a proper championship, and it needs to be done correctly with its own TV rights, and its own sponsorship, and its own platform of circuits. Proper championship above Formula 2, just below Formula 1, and it will also encourage and be a great place for new racetracks that want to get into Formula 1 just to sort of prove themselves and get them a little bit up the ladder towards a proper Formula 1 venue. And that's what I think should happen. And that's what isn't happening and probably won't happen. Having said all that, it's a good segue. Thank you very much, Creative Expression by Dion, because I did mention that there's this ridiculous surplus of young talent, more than ever I can remember, who are not getting into Formula 1 the way they should, even though they're showing their talent. And I said in the last live stream, I'm going to try and talk to one of these young guys and see if I can chat to him about that issue and how he sees life. So I did that, and I'm now going to play the interview that I recorded. It's about 20 minutes long, and I should tell you that this driver, it's Zane Maloney. I've been very impressed with Zane's driving this year, and not only his pace, but also his trackcraft and aggression and his general approach. And he was with Red Bull, then he's with Sauber. He's currently still with Sauber, sort of. But kind of, there was nothing out there that was logical for him. And he wants to get on with the racing, he wants to get on with his life. And so he's going to go to Formula E. Good luck to him. And it's a pretty good deal too. It's with the new Lola Yamaha team, and he's alongside Lucas Di Grassi, who's pretty good at Formula E, let alone everything else he's ever done. So it's a big opportunity for Zane, but it's a big thing for a young kid to have to do that, having done everything he could to prove how quick he is. And he's done it from Barbados, which is not the most normal of regions in which to become a Formula One, from which to become a Formula One World Championship. I know Lewis has got Granada heritage, but he wasn't born and raised in Granada as such. Well, he may have been, I don't think he was born either, no. And so, for Zane to have done what he's done, I think is absolutely amazing. B, he's a really good guy. And C, as a result of his commitment to Formula E, he's going to have to miss the last round of the Formula 2 Championship in Abu Dhabi. So his last round will be Qatar, I guess. And he's right there on P3 with Paul Aaron right now. So he's going to have to sacrifice that. So we began the chat by talking about that. First of all, missing that Abu Dhabi race, but nonetheless doing it for a good reason, which is that the first round of the 24-25 Formula E Championship is on in Brazil on the same day. So Zane Maloney, in my opinion, an incredibly talented driver who, Formula One, shame on you. He should be doing something pretty serious in F1. But anyway, here he is, and he's not in any way sorry to be doing Formula E. He's obviously delighted about it, and I think we should be behind him on that one as well. Got to miss that last round at Abu Dhabi because of Formula E, your new commitment, your new life. But how do you see the season having got to this point? You're very tight to P3 with Paul Aaron, and you've had some really good races too, some good wins. Very good. And you could have had more.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. The season was good. I mean, from my side, I drove well most of the season. Of course, there were things in my control and outside of my control that went wrong, let's say. So we could have had more podiums, more wins, but everyone can say the same. So it's a bit disappointing that I can't finish off the season, and my mistake in Baku put me kind of out the championship in that sense. But yeah, I'm looking forward to Qatar, finishing off strong with the team, and then on to the new adventure, which I'm looking forward to.
Just talk about that incident in Baku. Looking back now, the dust has settled a little bit.
I mean, it's difficult to really if I went back in the same position, I'm gonna fight just as hard to
Yeah.
keep the position. Obviously, coming out the pits, especially in Baku, with the long straight, your brakes cool down quite a lot. So you come out the pits with cold tires and cold brakes, and you use the straight to weave and get something into the tires. But I was racing, so I had to defend. I couldn't weave, get any temperature, and I broke early. I broke light compared to with warm tires, warm brakes. But I just misjudged a bit the deficit that it's going to be. So obviously, I went straight on. Should have been a podium. But yeah, I learned from it, and I mean, you live and you learn, don't you?
You do. Formula Two is, I mean, from somebody who watches Formula One obviously regularly and as many Formula Two races as I can, it looks unbelievably difficult. There are so many things that go on. Even the cars seem very temperamental and fragile when you're on the grid, waiting too long on the grid, perhaps. Other things as well, plus all the stuff that goes on in the race and the lottery of safety cars and pit stops must be unbelievably frustrating, I would imagine. I imagine. I don't know whether you just enjoy it and love every second of it, but I imagine it's very frustrating most of the time.
Yeah, it is. I mean, from the inside, it's chaotic as well. So, like you said, the cars are difficult to drive. You really need to be moving the car around to be quick. I mean, having a
What do you mean
lockup
by
is
that?
usually.
Do you mean throwing it around to be quick?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in Formula One, you really see the car planted into the ground, and any slide that they get, it's either going to be a big one or you're going to lose time. Whereas in F2, there's not as much downforce, so it's almost like a big F4 car where you're having to move around to carry the speed,
Mm.
and that's difficult because there still is some downforce. So when you get that slide, it's almost a guess on if you're going to make the corner or not. So it's a lot of that, and we only have one practice session straight into qualifying. So on different compounds, I mean, it's just you have to be on it straight away in F2 to be fast, and I think it's good because it teaches you how to be on it straight away for F1. Of course, we see rookies go into F1 and maybe are a bit too above in FP1 or the first session, but F2 does teach you in the long run for sure.
Monza must have been absolutely heartbreaking for you, I imagine, given how quick you were there.
Yeah, Monza was very disappointing. I mean, we had the pace all weekend. We dominated the weekend, and then an unfortunate safety car, which was completely out of our control, cost us the win. But I mean, it was still P2. But yeah, I left that weekend very disappointed.
That is also a function of the tire regulation as well. And I know it's similar to Formula One, but I'm wondering how much discussion you have. If you're in the, say, the first two rows of the grid, is it almost a given what tire you're going to start on? Can you ever take a gamble from that situation or not?
Yeah, I mean, we get the one-off event like Bahrain where the alternate strategy is actually better. Usually most of the time, I think once you're in the top four, you always go with the softer compound and then the harder
Yeah,
compound because you need to have a good start, you need to have a good lap one.
yeah.
And I mean, in my position in Monza, obviously Ollie boxed the lap before me, so we would have been stupid not to just cover him. So we covered him, and then you're at risk of anyone further behind staying out and getting a free pit stop. So F2 is always chaos every weekend.
Zay, I want to say something now that you may not want to talk about, but I think it's something that your fans and the fans would want me to ask, and that is that you've got the great track record. You've done incredibly well from your part of the world as well. Not many drivers from your region. Plus, you've been winning from day one, from age 12 or whatever, in karting and upwards. You've done a really good job in everything you've done. You were a Red Bull driver for a while, then you were a Sauber driver, and now you're doing Formula E. And it's a great deal, and congratulations on that. And I'm sure you're going to have a fabulous career in Formula E. But it's kind of disappointing that a guy like you isn't absolutely on the ladder straight into Formula One now. And how do you see that? Because there are guys you're beating who are in Formula One and going to be going to Formula One and probably doing very well. And you know how
Yeah,
good you are. For sure, you know how good you are now.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's difficult really because when you grow up, Formula One is the dream, the goal, and that's all you really care about. I think I've realized through my career from F3 to F2 now that it's not all inside my control, and I can only do what I can do on track. I mean, I've done that. things could have gone better from my side for sure, always, which could have put me in a better spot. But you just need to take the opportunities where they come. I think the drivers that wait it out their whole life for F1 and don't really look otherwise, then
Yeah.
they kind of lose their career in general. So, I mean, it's never over. Until I stop my career, F1's always a possibility if I'm performing in the championship that I'm doing. So I'm just focused on going into Formula E, doing the best job I can, and really impressing anyone in any series that I can, to be honest.
But what's your take on, and we'll get onto that in a second, and it is exciting and it's brilliant for you, but what's your take on these driver academies, the Formula One team driver academies? I'm guessing you're slightly cynical about it, but maybe you're not. I mean, what happened at Red Bull, for example? I mean, why didn't that go any further?
I mean, it's always different scenarios. I think in Red Bull there were a lot of drivers, a lot of us in F2, and last year I wasn't performing the way that I should have. My F2 year didn't really go well, so from that side of things, I was just focused on getting into F2 this year and doing the best job I can because my performances didn't warrant having anything in a career last year. So. This year's gone much better from my side. Obviously, I'm with Sauber, a bit of a different scenario there again. Um, Obviously, it's going towards Audi, and experience is key in Formula One. And I think the rookies are showing now that without experience, they're very fast and we can come
Yeah.
in and do the job. So I think that's a good eye opener for everyone that we are ready to step up. And I think that's quite clear now. So from my side, I mean, I can't really tell you exactly what goes on in every aspect because I don't know.
No, of course not.
It's always a surprise to me as well.
Well, a very mature attitude you have as well, Zane.
Thank you, firstly. I mean, it's always going to be, it's all to some extent, it's always going to be more talent than seats, more amazing drivers than seats available in any championship. So I think it's always going to be difficult. But obviously, I've grown up racing Ollie, Franco, Kimi. So they've all done an amazing job. They all deserve the seat, and that's where it gets difficult because who deserves it more? Because I think a lot of us have the talent to be in Formula One or in any high Formula E IndyCar doing very
Mm.
well.
So who's quicker, Ollie or Kimi? I'm only joking. I know you're not going to want to answer that one. But Ollie
Yeah,
went
I mean
well, didn't
they're
he?
both amazing drivers.
They are. Are you surprised by Franco?
No, not at all. I think growing up from karting up until now, I've been against him, and I know he's not always been in the best team in F4 in karting. I think he's always shown his pace, though. I mean, you see it in F2 when anyone who comes in and even if it's a one-off weekend, if they perform well, I think it's clear that they have the talent and they just need to a bit rough around the edges, the same as me, the same
Mm.
as anyone else. So I think there's so many of us in the world, 20, 30 drivers who can jump in any championship and be good.
Are you still got a Sauber deal as you go into Formula E?
Still all in the works. Obviously, I'm a Sauber driver this year. Not sure for next year what the plans are in any sense, to be honest.
Well, I'll say it because I know many of my viewers will say it. It's a shame you won't be in the Sauber F1 car next year. But anyway, I'm sure you feel the same way, but there you go. But what you will be is teammate to Lucas de Grassi in this mega new Formula E team. And this is Abt, right? Abt, who won the championship with Audi.
Absolutely.
Interestingly,
Yeah.
interesting irony there. Now working with Lola and Yamaha to do this new Formula E team. Tell us about that. Because you're not new to Formula E, right? You had an Andretti test deal for a while. You did some races
Yeah,
or not?
I was a reserve driver this year.
Reserve driver, yeah,
So I
yeah,
did all the FP zeros, the rookie tests. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, even the names Yamaha, Lola, Apt, from some very big names in motorsports, and it's a new package, a new philosophy,
yeah.
which means we can only go up from here. So I'm looking forward to see where we stand straight away. But I know the people within the companies are motivated, and I'm sure it's a winning product at the end of the day. So when that is, we don't know, but looking forward to seeing when.
How's that going to change your life in terms of organization, where you live, logistics? Because you've also had a big footprint in the United States for a long time, right?
Yeah, I raced in the US for 3 years, 2 years when I was in karting.
Hmm.
I mean, I love Barbados. So whenever I can get home, I get home into
Oh,
this in the sun.
good.
I still live there. I don't. When anyone asks where do you live, it's always Barbados. Everywhere else is just a working holiday destination for me.
You
So that
sound
will stay
like a
the same.
You sound like a Barbadian. Is that the right way to describe you? A Barbadian?
Bajan,
A Bajan, sorry, excuse me.
Bajan. Yeah,
You sound
no
like a
worries.
Bajan as well. You sound like a cricketer. That's where
Yeah,
we hear most of them, right?
yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah.
Good
I mean,
stuff.
Barbados is my home, and it always will be. So that's where I'll be.
Well, just to finish on the Formula E, so will you be based in Germany where the team is or not? Or will you be literally going up and down from home?
Yeah, I mean, how I see it is I'll be at the factory like I always have in my career. I'll be at the factory. I'll be doing everything I can 100% to win races and perform. Anytime that's not valid, I'll be in Barbados. Put it that way. That's it.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's tell us about Barbados. How near to the beach are you? Did you grow up?
Everything's 5 minutes away. So I'm 5 minutes
Wow.
from the airport. I'm 5 minutes from the beach, 5 minutes from another beach. So it's a very small island, less than 300,000 people. Um, so yeah, everything's close. I mean, if you've come to Barbados, you'll never forget it, and that will be at the top of your list for the next year.
Well, we'll be over there. And your dad and his brother have an amazing kart facility there, which kind of told you where you were going with your life, correct?
My entire family has raced from the time that they were young. My uncle owns Bushy Park, which is actually a car circuit as well. I mean, it would be great to get F1 there in the future. That's the main goal from my side, not a business side.
Excellent.
So that would be
Excellent.
amazing. But yeah, Bushy Park is it's the only circuit. It's the best circuit in the Caribbean in general. We've hosted loads of events, so
Yeah,
looking
I've
forward to
seen
getting
that.
some big ones there.
And you know the circuit there pretty well, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, what's quite funny is, and what makes it unique is it's a car circuit, but there's many different links. So we can create like 25, I think, karting circuits and like five or six car circuits as well.
Excellent.
So I've driven every track possible, every layout.
Tell us about life in growing up for you. Obviously, it was a dream at one point, and then it starts to become reality in this part of the world where nobody's ever done what you want to do before.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite funny because I just live day by day. So I never really sat back and kind of thought what I want to be or what I am. So for my entire career, it was just the next step. Every year we were moving up. It was funny, up until this year in F2, I've never done more than one season in a category. So I was always a rookie. So we were just always having so much to learn. I mean, the initial goal was to get to Europe, have some fun, see what the karting's like over there. And then obviously when I started performing, then that's when it got a bit more serious. And I'd say from kind of F4 level until now, it's been let's see how far we can get and where we can get in
Hmm.
motorsports. Like you said, I mean, there's no one ever from Barbados in F2 or at this level, so everything's been new. Everything's been learning from people who have been in it for a long time. My management has been a big part of it. ADD management, obviously, they took Lando to F1, so we've been learning from a lot of people along the way.
So now it's Formula E, and that's international. It's the future. It's an interesting car, lots of technology, lots of management. How quick are they? What are they like to drive?
They're nice to drive. I mean, of course, in terms of downforce levels and raw speed as an F1 car, it's not the same. It's not there. We're not on slicks. It's pretty much on road tires. I think it's very fun to drive in a very different way. I mean, in F1, F2 is it's the downforce and the pure speed and adrenaline of the car. I think in Formula E, it's more moving around even more, getting the car to move and yeah, using your inputs to be
Hmm.
fast is very technical. With the energy side of things is difficult as well, very difficult, more than fuel saving even. There's a lot of technical things that a driver can do to be fast in the race, which is why having Lucas as a teammate is probably the best thing. He's double my age, double my experience, and I can learn from him.
And he's coming off a relatively lean year for him, so he'll be hungry, and it's a good time to grow organically, I guess, as a group as well. All these new components coming together.
For sure. I mean, you can see straight away in testing how motivated he is. I think he sees something amazing in what's going on as well. And I think me coming in as the new driver, seeing someone so motivated who's been in it for a long time. I mean, it's easy for him to go home and he's done everything in his career to sit down and watch racing. But for
Mm.
him to choose to be part of this, I think it says everything, and I'm looking forward to pushing together with him.
Paul Marie in Bridgetown.
That I would love that. I mean, I think that's more realistic. That's very realistic, actually, to be able to have that to happen. I think we go to Hong Kong, Japan already, so
Mm.
Barbados is even closer than there. So I mean, I'll be pushing for that to happen for sure.
Well, it's about time the motorsporting world returned to that part of the world. After that, we had the Bahamas Speed Week, which was so brilliant in the 50s and 60s. I don't know if you know David McLaughlin, who's been doing a lot of revivals there in the Bahamas over the last 10 years, done a really good job. Also with
Yep.
juniors there in karting. And everybody loved it. At the end of the Formula One season, everybody went there. I know that was the Bahamas, but it'd be great now if we could bring Barbados back into it in some form or another.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the passion that everyone in Barbados has for motorsports is amazing. So that would
Really?
be yeah, it would be crazy. You when we have a rally. It's called Rally Barbados every year. Ken Block actually won it a few years ago. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of fans on the road jumping up and down, going crazy. They love drifting. They love loud cars. It would be amazing. It's also a different lifestyle. So everyone coming to Barbados, yes, it's racing. You're having a race weekend, but it's also a bit of a holiday as well.
Have you done any of that?
Yeah, I did it's funny. I've done two Rally Barbados, but I've not finished one yet. So I've always
What were
been
you
very
driving?
fast.
What were you in?
Skoda R5.
Oh, okay. What's
Yeah.
an
So
R5? Does that mean like a WRC
Rally
3
2. Yeah.
Rally 2?
Rally
Okay,
2.
quick car
Yeah.
then. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
very quick. And I've been quick. I know Hayden Paddon came down last year, and I
Oh,
was
wow.
I was on pace, but obviously circuit racing is a bit different. So I would be using all the road, and but in a rally you can't quite do that. So it always bit me after a few stages. So I need to calm down a bit anytime I do a rally.
And how are you on drifting?
Again, I've done it quite a lot. So last year, especially, I had a crash on the first day of the rally. So I was out the rally in
Hmm.
terms of the standings. So for the next day, I just went and drifted all day, did donuts all day for the fans. It's all over my Instagram, and they were going insane. And they love it in Barbados.
How do you like to drive a car? Do you like to drive it on the rear or the front? I mean, what do you like to feel in a car?
I mean, I feel a lot, so I feel more than most. I think I drive very based off of feel and less references. Uh, I think an oversteer car is always quicker than an understeer car, no matter what. So I much rather be moving around, a bit more difficult, but it's always faster.
Makes a lot of sense. You got the front end planted, then you can always handle the rear.
Yeah, that's what Max is the best at.
Very good, Zane. Okay, buddy. Thanks so much.
Nice to meet you.
Well, there you go. Zane Maloney. Formula E's gain, Formula One's loss, I'd say. Wouldn't it be nice if the Sauber team next year was Teo Pourchaire, Zane Maloney? Wow. Anyway, it isn't. And good luck to him for doing Formula E. I think we'll see more of Zane back in when he's finished with Formula E. And if Formula One isn't where he ends up, then as I say, more shame on the system. And it just reinforces what I say. We need a championship below Formula One, above Formula Two, for guys like Zane Maloney and for Teo Pourchaire and for Felipe Drugovich and all these, and Mick Schumacher even, you could almost argue, and all these people that are very talented and don't have the opportunity to be where they should be. And yeah, thank you very much. And creative expression by Dion, that was a perfect segue. As I say, thank you for that into the interview with Zane. So good man. And I think you get a feeling there for how good he is. He likes oversteer too. Can't be a bad thing, can it? And wouldn't it be cool to go to Bridgetown, Barbados? Formula One. Oh, not enough room. Got to have the big pit area. Massive thing. See, speaking of the big pit area, you see Alpine have done a motorhome, a Philip Stark motorhome design. at a time when, I mean, I am a bit of a Philip Stark fan myself, I've got to say, but I would never think of him in terms of saving the planet, going green, Formula E, Formula One, or anything else, particularly at a time when Formula One needs to be curbing its lavish expense in the paddock area and looking a little bit more responsible in the budget cap era. I just find that whole Philip Stark Alpine thing a bit too self-indulgent and not enough using recycled materials. I didn't see any mention of that sort of stuff in there. Maybe I'm wrong, in which case I'm doing them a disservice, and congratulations to them. But I remember when Ferrari came out with their motorhome, their new motorhomes a few years ago, they made a point of them being all using recycling materials. That smelt a bit odd, I gotta say, but that was no issue. And yet, there we are. Anyway, that apropos nothing at all. Stephen Dobbins, just continuing the questions now. Christian Horner has been bemoaning the age of their Cold War era wind tunnel as a source of recent upgrades not working. All right, okay. Well, I'm surprised because I know how intolerant Adrian Newey is of substandard wind tunnels, and so if it is a Cold War era terrible wind tunnel, then I'm very confused because I can't imagine there would be anything more accurate and precise than Adrian's wind tunnel there. Yes, of course, there'll be new bits that perhaps they don't have the space or the scope to fit to the new tunnel, and maybe it's that. But the Adrian that I know would have been right on top of all those upgrades anyway. Another question from Creative Expression. It would give drivers unable to make Formula One for whatever reason to showcase their skills to Formula One teams. Allow drivers to run that series a maximum of 3 years. Have the team support their old cars. Yeah, well, it's exactly what I'm saying, and thank you for grasping it. And I hope more do, because it's the only way to solve this problem. And we definitely have the market for it. And definitely there are more and more countries that want to be on the Formula One calendar, and we don't want to make that any bigger than it is already. And this is a perfect way of balancing all the books and the drivers against the circuits, against the potential money out there to run them, and putting the old cars to good use as well. Kevin Pryor says it'll be a little odd seeing Toyota next to Haas's name, because Haas and Ferrari are like unbreakable marriage. They are, but Toyota, certainly in my experience, and this goes back to when I was doing USF1 or trying to do USF1 before it got kiboshed, Toyota love the concept of a Formula One team based in the United States or carrying the American flag. The United States is a huge market for Toyota, and when we were on track on USF1, we were certainly very near to doing a deal with Toyota North America, and I'm not surprised to see them wanting to be with Haas now. It's good, Haas becoming more and more American ultimately. I suppose, if Andretti got his entry, they would all be gravitating towards that, but I suppose, that's Haas's gain, isn't it? Like that. But yeah, it is odd. But then again, it's odd to have three big manufacturers involved in one Formula One team. Dallara, Toyota, Ferrari. Lou Sequoia says, hit the like, guys. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, that'd be very kind. And I'm going to put that video out of Zane as a separate standalone video as well. I might even put it out in audio form, as I will with Terry one. And for those that don't know, a lot of my stuff now goes out in podcast audio form as well, which means it's downloadable and you can listen to it on the bus or the train or wherever you are. So that's good. And equally, it's coming out on YouTube Music as well. I think it's downloadable without having to go to YouTube Premium, but certainly you can watch it with the screen lock on, unlike normal YouTube videos. Certainly you can listen to it, sorry. Kevin Pryor, I can't see Michael Andretti coming into F1 now. Well, would you? The way you've been treated and putting it all together. And there are too many other things they're doing, the Andrettis, so well. More than that, though, I think it's a slight against Mario and everything he's done for motorsport and for Formula One over the years, and more respect should have been shown. And I said that at the time. The wording of the press release put out by the FIA was absolutely appalling, I thought. Absolute slap in the face for Mario Andretti and everything he did. And so, yeah, great shame. Great shame. Benzie News showdown. PW, what's your rating of Lando's chance to P1 qualifying and win at COTA this weekend? Yeah, I mean, he'll obviously be really quick. I just got a feeling that it might be Oscar. in which case there'll be even more fireworks at McLaren. But yeah, Lando will be good there. I mean, it's a difficult circuit not to be good at if you are. I mean, there's too many negatives there, but John Surtees is like, isn't it? It's an easy circuit to be good at if you're very good. And Lando and Oscar are both very good, and the car's very good. So they will both be very good there. Who's going to win? If it's Oscar just ahead of Lando and they're 10 seconds ahead of the pack, maybe they'll get Oscar to move over on this occasion. But that's a big ask for McLaren to find themselves in that position. So, because Ferrari will have upgrades as well, for Pete's sake. They're not slow at the moment. So I just got a feeling that it might be Oscar, but it could well be Lando who wins. And good luck to him. I just wish he was going in with at least 25 more points than he had, which he could have had easily. So, Benzie News' Showdown says, what could go wrong this weekend at COTA? Well, quite a lot could go wrong, of course. We could have Lando and Max out at the first corner. We could have, I don't know, Charles again struggling to make Q3 when he's been quickest in whatever, or getting the pole for the sprint race and something goes wrong for the sprint race or whatever. I don't know. So many things could go on. I don't even want to go near it really. As I say, COTA for me is not one of these circuits where there's a Max corner or a Lewis corner. There's lots of corners where lots of drivers are very good, and Formula One looks great there, and the circuit looks great on television. But it's not, we're not talking Beckett's, we're not talking Copse, we're not talking. We're not even talking really turn 1 at Silverstone, in the new Silverstone. Sujit says, greetings from India. Is it cost effective to set up a national GT3 championship in India? Do you know what are the costs involved compared to Formula 3 or Formula 4? Well, the thing is, in my understanding, is that Stefan Rattel has done a very, very good job and basically runs all of that GT racing, and everything you see out there that has a roof over it is basically Stefan Rattel. I'm exaggerating slightly, but GT3, GT4, all that, where, there's a lot of Stefan Rattel. And his basic business model, which he very cleverly and correctly defined, 10 years ago, probably longer, was Bernie and Max have sucked all the money out of motorsport for the benefit of Formula One, and even when they go, it's going to remain the same. Nothing will change. Formula 2, Formula 3 will be funded by the wealthy parents of young up-and-coming Formula One stars who all want their kids to be Lewis Hamiltons or Max Verstappens. So what about the rest of racing? How's that going to be funded? The big manufacturers aren't going to continue to support all the big racing, world endurance racing, because it's very expensive and there's very little interest in it in terms of television exposure, because Formula One's taken it all. The only way for the rest of motorsport to survive is to find the equivalent of the rich fathers, the rich families that finance F3 and F2, and that is the rich amateurs that want to go racing in very glamorous GT, GT3, GT4 and whatever, hypercars, whatever. And so he built the whole empire around wealthy amateur drivers. So my answer to you, Sujit, is if there are enough wealthy amateurs in India to finance a GT3 series with one, say, semi-pro driver alongside them, but basically all the money is put up by these wealthy amateur drivers, and they're all reasonably quick, then yes. But if there isn't, it's a very difficult championship to stage anywhere in the world, let alone India, because it's like all forms of motorsport. It's very expensive, and if there's very little television exposure for the sponsors, how are you going to finance it? The promoters aren't going to make any money because there are no spectators at the races either. If you look at the grandstands at those races, they're virtually empty. So, not all of them, but some of them. So it's a question of, well, are there enough wealthy amateurs to justify a GT3, GT4 championship? That's what it's all about. Creative Expression, I think, is agreeing with me here. Sim racing cannot duplicate what you feel in your butt, what the car is doing. As someone who raced go-karts for decades, there's not a simulator that can duplicate that feel in the seat of your pants. No, what's going on here? So, Another one, Chowdhury. Do you miss the Sepang Grand Prix? I do very much, because Sepang for me was, it was the first Tilke circuit, and it was opened, for 4 years after Ayrton's passing in Imola in '94, and it was opened in '99, I think, and it was the first Tilke circuit, and it combined everything. It combined all the things Bernie wanted, which is great camera angles for the circuit signage. It combined very nice corners with lots of space and convenience for the teams, and logistics convenience as well, very near the airport. So it's a great racetrack in every dimension. Very hot, but also had torrential rain periodically, so the weather was never predictable, which is a good thing. So I loved it. I loved everything about Sepang. And so what's happened? It's not on the calendar anymore. Too much squabbling over money, I think, in Malaysia now. I think that's the problem. And so I think it's a big issue, and I don't understand why Formula One hasn't done more to try to get that race back on the calendar. I know they have Singapore now, and maybe they don't want it to detract from Singapore. Maybe that's the reason, but they could certainly put it on at a different time of year. As per the inside paddock sources, says Nitin Rathi, which engine is going to be the best in 26? Well, there you go. Nobody knows. Absolutely nobody knows. And you've got potentially great engines from all the big manufacturers, including Ford. And Max would know exactly as much as you know at the moment. So there's no way he could base a decision on what he wants to do in 2026 on what is happening right now. And we all have to wait and see. But it's a whole new era. And it could be that one of them gets it absolutely right and everybody else is off the ball. Or maybe they're all going to be very, very similar. Who knows? Nobody knows. Kevin Pryor, going around Monaco with one hand on the wheel and the other hand constantly on gear stick takes some talent. Yeah, it does. And it wasn't unusual. And bear in mind, it wasn't, Monaco, more than most circuits, did actually require two hands on the wheel, particularly the station hairpin, where the way to get around it before they could adjust the steering the way they do now, you put one hand up on the steering like that, and you did that, and you crossed armed and you went through, and then you let the steering go, and a bit of a slide coming out. So some corners you definitely needed two hands. But yeah, you can look at quite a lot of shots from the 60s, overhead shots and nice shots from Monaco, and you can often see there's one hand and the other hand's down somewhere in the cockpit and he's doing a gear change. Kevin Price's Mansell Senna battles were fab. They were indeed. Sachit Malhotra says, hello Peter from Down Under. Would love to know more about you and where you grew up in your Formula One journey. Well, I grew up in Fairlight, Sydney, a lovely little area on the North Shore near Manly. We had a lovely little bay there and a pool which was straight out to the Pacific Ocean. There was a pool, but it was enough for the stop sharks coming in. But when the tide was high, it was all fresh water, and then the tide would go down below the level of the wall. Lovely place. I grew up there, and the surf beaches were just around the corner. I used to get the ferry to school every day over in Rose Bay. And very early on, I just loved the motor racing there. Warwick Farm was a wonderful circuit, designed and built by Geoffrey Sykes, who's an Englishman. He used to work at the BARC. He started the AARC, Australian Automobile Racing Club. And from quite a young age, whenever the school holidays came, I was there working. I was going to the AARC, getting a free lunch, but basically addressing envelopes, writing letters, doing the member subscription forms, replicating the lap times that the stewards, the official timekeepers had got for each driver at the previous race, and putting them into name cards for every driver who'd ever raced at Warwick Farm. Being the first to read the latest edition of Motoring News when it came out by Air. I couldn't believe it. Airmail copy of Motoring News. And then back to school again, and not really wanting to go back to school. And then the race meetings would come, and I was started off as a flag marshal. And then I did that really up until about 15 or 16. Then I became the press officer at Warwick Farm, which was quite good because I started writing articles and doing press releases and started to write. And I don't know. I was very lucky because before long I met a guy called Tom Floyd, really good guy, who was editor of Australian Motoring News, nothing to do with Motoring News in England, Australian Motoring News, which I now know years later was actually owned and started by Neil Allen, the fabulous racing driver of the time, Australian driver. Tom worked for him, and I used to go there most nights into their office in North Sydney. I can still smell the glue and the printing smell of that newspaper, and writing race reports and feature articles there with Tom, and we did all that. And then I started writing for, quite sure how I actually got my first article into Autosport. I think I wrote to them and just said, I'm out here, I'd love to do some reports for you, and started writing some reports for Autosport. And then the Tasman series came, and I started writing, and Peter Bacalaw, that's right, very good writer, another writer, he sort of, I think he slowed down a little bit in terms of his writing output in the early 70s, and I did the 70 Tasman for Autosport. Then I came over to England just for a couple of months because my sister was getting married in England, and went to crash the Ford Motorsport party, which was a big deal at the time. When Ford did the Motorsport press conference at the end of the year, it was a big thing. That's how big Ford were. Not anymore. Well, they will be in the future, I guess, with Red Bull. And I met David Phipps, very tall photojournalist who's very tight with Colin Chapman and Bernie, and wrote for a lot of magazines. And he was looking for a young guy to ghost write for him because he had so many commitments all around the world, clashing commitments sometimes. And he offered me a job. I went back to Australia. He wrote a letter to me, came back, flew back via South Africa, and did the South African Grand Prix for Autosport under his name. And and then I started writing for all these magazines. And then I became sports editor of Autocar, and it kind of went from there, really, thanks to Ray Hutton. So, yeah, good times. I never knew where it was going to end up. And I always thought it was going to take me a million years to do this job I wanted, which was to be working full-time in motor racing in some form or another. And yet it did happen, amazingly. And here I am, still kind of doing the same thing. Still not sure what I want to be when I grow up, really. That's the problem. Get in the army, my mum used to say. That's what you need. Darn good spell in the army. Not sure I want to do that, thank you. And now I've got a few glitches going on with the old chat, which is why I'm meandering around. So we've done the super chats, haven't we? Yeah, I think so. I think we're up to date with super chats. So let's just have a look now at a few more, and then we'll pack it in, as John Surtees used to say. Don't tell me this is jamming again. No, don't jam. Yeah, that's a nice question. Again, sorry for the passing of your mum. There's no love greater than the love of a son for his mother. Sadly, I've been losing my mother since 2015 with high diagnosis of dementia. Well, God bless you and your mum, and best wishes. Andretti, just agreeing with me, Andretti entry is a big slap in the face. The great American ambassador of the sport. Not only American, just a great ambassador of the sport. I mean, there aren't many people on the planet Earth better than Mario for representing you, even if you want to be represented with an Italian flavour or just talking about generic Formula One. I mean, Mario is the man. He's been underused by Formula One ever since he retired, and very badly treated by Formula One over this whole business of the entry. Hello, Peter. I tell you what, when I asked I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Look, can't open page. The whole studio thing's gone now. So what I'm going to do is, I think we're still live, are we not? Hopefully. Let's have a look. No.
Imagina poderte comer 30 pinchos de tortilla más al año. Nosotros no los...
So, we seem to have had the usual old drama here. Typical, isn't it? Now, I think we're live again. I hope we are. Now, this is typical of this whole thing. It was glitching, and then it's, it wouldn't move, and then it just closed down altogether. And I think we're live again. I hope we are. Very difficult. It says end stream, which suggests that the stream is still going. So I'm going to try again to do this pop-up chat. It's very annoying, isn't it? I'm sorry for everybody about this. But typical of what, I don't know, modern technology, isn't it? So get rid of that. Put that way. So now, I have no idea whether this is going to work or not. Let's have a look. I'm just trying to get the chat to work again. Can't even find the chat at the moment. Where is it? Here we are. So now I'm going to go back to OBS, and now I'm going to bring up the chat. And now I'm going to try and click on the front. Where are we? Simulators, Monaco, Hand Off the Wheel, Senna Mansell. What's the most surprising? There you go, it's working. What's the most surprising thing, says Umar Siddiqui, you've learned about drivers' personalities off camera? Only that they're unbelievably competitive. And whatever it is, if they're waiting to go, if they're in a green room before they're going in, for an interview or something, and I happen to be there as well for whatever reason, whatever they're doing, if there's a bowl of fruit and there's one nice looking apple and the others are a bit scungy, it'll always be a sort of challenge to see who can get the nice apple. Or if you are, if you're in traffic, they'll always try to get in front of whatever car is annoying them in front, even if it means not doing anything stupid. But they're just very competitive people, whatever they do. Snooker, and off the side of the clubhouse, the snooker thing, they'll always want to win. They want to do it just for fun. Nothing's for fun. It's always for winning. Golf, snooker, football, it's got to be for winning. That's the characteristic of all racing drivers. Probably a characteristic of most athletes, actually, but certainly racing drivers. Same gentleman, Umar Siddiqui, you've interviewed countless drivers. What's the most striking piece of advice or insight you've ever gotten from one of them? Oh, well, Jim Clark. I didn't actually interview Jim. We just sat there together he had a coffee, I think, and I was drinking a Coke. And I said to him, I really, really want to spend my life in motorsport. I'm not really sure what I want to do yet, but it's what I feel I can do, and I want to be in your world, Jim. And he looked at me and said, well, all I can tell you is never, ever give up. And if you give it 100%, you'll definitely make it. So that was pretty good advice. And I've always remembered that. And I still haven't made it, but I'm trying hard, still trying to give it 100%. Thank you, Jim Clark. I've had plenty about that. I mean, Jackie Stewart taught me a lot about driving, about gentleness on the steering and the pedals and the gear shift. And Ayrton Senna taught me a lot about driving, particularly before I did that race at Macau, where I managed to finish second afterwards, which was amazing. And who else? Gilles Villeneuve always taught me to have both hands on the wheel at all time, if possible, if you're not changing gear. And who else? Carlos Reutemann said, always try to imagine the exit of the corner before you've turned in. Then that's the key. If you've got that happening, then everything starts to slow down at the right rate. RS660 Alex says, I think sim racing is really good for all the repeatable aspects like shifting, and is good for racecraft. Yeah, repeatable aspects, exactly what I say. Procedural things, repeatable things. Racecraft, probably quite good, yeah. Not quite sure, can you really feel the difference in the track surface from one lap to another in sim racing? Maybe you can. I doubt it, to be honest. And that's where trackcraft is very important, isn't it? It's knowing what part of the road has the most grip at any given moment. RS660 Alec, Kota is a track where P2 has better grip on the grid than the pole. Yeah, well, that's right. And it's a relatively short run up there as well. So I have made that point. And it's another thing I've always banged on about, that they should bring back the freedom of choice for the man on the pole as to which side of the road he wants to start on. And I don't see why they don't do that. There was the occasional complaint about, difficult for the stewards when they're laying all the timing equipment on the grid and all that stuff. But it's only, it's not that big a deal to change it around or wait until the pole has been decided or whatever they need to do. And I think, and I've spoken to a few FIA people and they said, no, it'd be easy to do. So why don't they do it? It'd be a great moment, I think, when you're interviewing the pole guy to say, okay, and what side are you going to start from? A bit like, are you going to winning the toss? Are you going to serve this end or receive that end? Whatever. Do that. Make it a big deal. Let the pole winner choose the side. There are circuits. Suzuka's another one, as we well know. So, it's a shame that is there. So will Max try and finish second? Or qualify second? Get it. The brakes in Singapore could give Red Bull, Merc, Ferrari a chance to catch up. Yeah, equally it could give McLaren a chance to get even further away or keep the status quo. It is the same for everyone. And McLaren have got better building blocks right now than anybody else. So, they aren't going to be going sideways. Killman the Vampire says, hi everybody. Hi. Dan, hi Peter. Would you consider Ollie Berman a pay driver? A video on another channel puts his father's wealth in the $1 billion range. Do you think he pays for his seat? Nah. I think he got a few legs up. Probably helped him get into the Ferrari Academy when he did. But no, I don't see that. I see Ollie as a driver with absolutely the talent that is commensurate with his opportunity. And I think he's maximized his opportunities. He's done extremely well, as we've seen. So no, and I don't see that. And I see his father very much in the background, a bit like Lando's dad, just being there, and which is great, but not in any way interfering or involving himself in a way that some other dads do. So no, I don't include Ollie in that area at all. RS660 Alex says they're all paid drivers except Lewis and Esteban. There's a big thing. Charles Leclerc, paid driver? Don't think so. Carlos Sainz? Don't think so. Sergio Perez? I mean, it depends what you mean by paid driver, doesn't it? I mean, we used to call them renter drivers. That's what we used to call them, this pay driver thing. So paying, is it a participle or what? Pay drivers, what does that mean exactly? A renter driver is a driver that a team owner like Frank Williams used to hire for 3 races to make sure the bills got paid. That was it. Damien McGee, whatever. Or Richard Robarts at Brabham. But they're not, you can't call Sergio Perez a renter driver or a paying driver because he never had any money when he came to Formula One. The money around Perez is all generated around his success as a Mexican driver in Formula One. And Mexico just happens to do a better job of getting behind its drivers than many other countries. And there's a big business around Perez now. And so a lot of money comes out of Mexico around Perez driving a specific Formula One car. It doesn't mean to say he's a paying driver. He's earned that. There's a big difference. And I think we all need to be aware of that. It's like often you hear people saying, oh, he's on 30 million or 40 million. But they tend to sort of forget the small print. Is that 40 million over 5 years or 2 years or 3 years? They just love these big numbers. Paid drivers. So Pierre Gasly, you're saying Pierre Gasly's a paid driver? I don't think so. Pierre Gasly absolutely came from nothing with his parents and his brothers and his sister maybe, have just sacrificed everything to get Pierre into Formula One. So there's no way he's a paying driver. Benzo Swanza, how long do you think Red Bull were running their asymmetric brake system after they got told to take it off in Miami? They've never been the same. Max said before Miami, the car's perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think they probably ran it in 23, but I think they built the 24 car around it a bit more. Maybe just in terms of ease of maintenance or ease of application on the car and the architecture of the car around it for the 24 car. But I think, they ran it up until after China and that took it off before Miami. That's what I think. As I say, maybe wrong. That's what I think. That's what it looks. The evidence looks like that. Creative expression by Dion. You've said to name the top 5 greatest drivers over the decades is difficult, but would you rate the top 5 designers? Oh, very difficult as well. You'd have to put Ferry Porsche, Uhlenhaut, Colin Chapman, John Cooper, and we haven't even got to Mauro Foggieri or Carlo Chiti or Adrian Newey or Patrick Head or Neil Oatley or Ron Toronac. So many, no. I couldn't even do 5 on that, I'm afraid. Ettore Bugatti. No, impossible to do 5 go to either. But you could almost do the top 5 engineers who were also very fast racing drivers. You could just about do that. You'd have Uhlenhaut, Colin Chapman, Jack Brabham, Adrian Newey, and let's have a 5th. I'd love to say Tony Alcock, who sadly we lost in the Graham Hill plane crash because his Barana cars were fabulous and he was a quick driver too, I think, from memory. But For a fifth sympathy. Oh, Costin. Mike Costin. He was good. Very good. Designed, well, apart from being a co-designer of the Cosworth DFV, but he also designed very much involved in the design of the four-wheel drive Cosworth Formula One car, which never raced. Jason Lee, hi Peter, first time catching up the live stream. Just wanted to say thank you for sharing these valuable memories and knowledge of us. Greeting from Taiwan. How kind of you, Jason. Thank you very much. Taiwan, lovely country. Ian Barron, hi. Everyone watching, hope you're well and having a great day. Thank you, Ian. Yeah. And it's your 50th birthday, Ian. Well, happy birthday to you. BWNT, condolences. Thank you so much. A lot of people, Ian Barron, sending their love, loss. Thank you. I'm trying to be very happy about it, actually, because my mum passed away just short of her 103rd birthday. And it was a very peaceful passing. You know, you can't ask for any more than that, really. And not so long ago, I digitized her diary of when she, last year at school, maybe the year after she left school, she toured Canada with the school on a cricket tour, would you believe, and went by ship to Canada. And this was 38, 39. Anyway, she did all the tour, but they had to come back in a hurry because war had been declared, and she came back on a liner, but they had to zigzag their way back over the Atlantic with destroyer convoy. Amazing, isn't it, to think she did that? And then she joined the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, WAF, yeah. And she was at Fighter Command on D-Day fairly near Dover, underground, moving those things around, you know, where all the Germans are and the British are. And my dad was a corporal in the Air Force as well, in doing radar too, but he's also a jazz trumpeter and was the lead trumpet in a jazz band in the war, and that's how they met, at a dance. And their honeymoon was at the Waldorf Hotel in London during the Blitz. What a life. RS660 Alec, they will market the heck of a USB-C charge point. Yeah, well, yeah. That's my reference to that earlier. Killerman, the condolences to your family, thank you. Chiba, hey Peter, how is it Carlos having Alex chase him from race 1 next year? Thanks. Yeah, I mean, that'll be interesting, won't it? Science versus Albon. Science, in a way, has got quite a lot to live up to now, given the pace of Franco upstaging Albon, who's celebrating, I think they said, his 100th Grand Prix this year. Do people celebrate these at Austin? Do people celebrate things like that these days? I think these days 100 Grand Prix is nothing in that. There's about 50 Grand Prix a year or whatever it is. Finton Mains, thank you very much. Matt Alford, thank you, Matt. And love doing these live chats with you people. And to be honest with you, it's a very good way of recharging my batteries after the weekend and, you know, having a laugh and sharing some passion with you guys. Thank you very much. Jason Lee, condolences, thank you. Are you a Newcastle United fan, Ian Barron? I'm not. Oh, he's talking to Jason Lee, sorry. Wrong question to ask me, because I'm not actually into football at all. Poor Max, not justice for Lewis Hamilton. Anyway. Umar Siddiqui, hi Peter, in capitals, do you have any hope for Ferrari next year since Fred came there as a positive energy? What do you think? Yeah, I do. I think, as I said before, I quite like the way they've buckled down post not getting Adrian Newey into promoting stroke reorganizing the people they've got and getting the best from them. And I think that's a really healthy, positive, organic thing to be doing, particularly if it's managed by a guy like Freddie Vasseur, who has not only got a very good feel for racing people and for racing in general, but also for racing engineering and setup. And we're almost at the point now where it is a sort of setup era rather than somebody going out and creating some incredible new innovation. And and blowing everybody away. You can't do that with these regulations. We're right at the end of this era of these particular regulations, and it's almost about just setup, getting the car to work from race to race. Well, it is about that. And that actually, if you think about it, that's what a guy like Freddie Vasseur was doing throughout his Formula 3 and Formula 2 career, trying to make sure that he had consistency one race to the next in those really difficult GP2, GP3 cars. Those Dalaras, whatever they were, on the tyres they had, the very short amount of practice they had. All that is actually what Freddie Vasseur does really well. And I've got a lot of confidence. Confidence is probably the wrong word. I've got a lot of hope, that's probably a better word, that Ferrari actually will be very good race to race next year. I'm not saying they'll have a winning car necessarily on a regular basis, but I think they'll be there or thereabouts most races. I think they'll have a bigger sweet spot than most teams out there. So I got quite a lot of confidence and faith in that. Klotsky on James Hunt. Aren't smokers simply more sensitive to nervosity, being in company? Anything can make them light up, even the presence of a yet to be touched glass of alcohol. Well, I don't know. A better man than I could answer that question for sure. I get the feeling that, what did I think about James? I don't know. I just saw him. He just always had a Marlboro in his hand. What can I say? It just seemed to be part of James Hunt. So there you go. Martin Columbi. All my thoughts to you and your mum, Pete. Thank you. Condolences. Finton Mains. What are the television viewing figures for F2 or other feeder series? Not very high. I'm not convinced that can be changed. Well, I think that's right. That's absolutely right. That's exactly my point. So there is no business model that works really for F2, F3 other than the rich fathers of talented sons paying for it, which is what Bernie and Flavio Briatore and Bruno realized years ago, and that's how those championships have evolved. Minimal hospitality opportunities, minimal access to the Formula One paddock, just let them get on with it, and that's where we're at. But that's exactly my point. In order now to be doing something beyond that, drivers like Zane and Teo Pourchaire and drivers like that need to have a championship, like a tier just below Formula One, with its own structure, with its own TV rights, with its own platform of circuits, the whole thing independent of everything else that's going on, obviously owned by Formula One, in which the Formula One teams have their cars from previous years out there. And that's so that's why we need that. That'll never happen in F2 or F3 because of the way they were born and conceived. But it could happen if we did a new championship of the type I just described. RS66 says, Zane Maloney, exclamation mark. Why is he not getting anything? Unique country, first in championship for so long. Yeah, he's great, isn't he? Richard Phillips sending heartfelt. Thank you very much, Richard. Ian Barron, who lives near a racetrack. I live near Croft, near Darlington, in the northeast of England. Yeah, not quite the same as Bushy Park in Barbados, but I'm sure it has its days. Rick Dale, hi Peter, do you remember the publication Grand Prix International? I do really well. Yeah, that was the Gregor Grant magazine. Gregor was the founder of Autosport. And then he left, and then he started this magazine called Grand Prix International. Oh, no, that was Speed World International. Grand Prix International. That was the French magazine, Grand Prix International, wasn't it? Yeah. And that was a fabulous magazine. And I'm just going to get a copy. 1 second. Right. Here we go. As promised, Grand Prix International. That fabulous way. This is the issue when Nigel won the 85 South African Grand Prix. Look at that. Profile, Michele Alboreto. Endurance, Brands Hatch, Mount Fuji. Formula One, Brands, Kyalami. And beautiful photography, lovely layout, just amazing magazine. And a lot of the photographs by Bernard Assay, great photographer. Look at this lovely feature on Michele Alboreto. Brilliant, great magazine. Actually, so ridiculous. We don't have magazines like this anymore. It's so good. I mean, I have them. I'm lucky now in the house where I live. They do rallying, world endurance, everything else. To have all these magazines to hand, and I just walk past and read one for half an hour, having a coffee. It's a great thing to do. And it's such a shame they don't continue. They haven't continued. San Remo Rally report. They were the days. San Remo Rally. So, Chiba says, no, they have the talent on that day. Remember Nick de Vries. He's saying the talent for one day but then goes away. Yeah, well, I personally think Zane Maloney is a step above Nick de Vries in terms of talent and speed. Nothing against Nick. I think he's really good, but I think Zane Maloney is special. I think a lot of very good Isaac Hajar is another one. Very, very good. Great interview. Chiba says, thank you very much. Kilman says, good work, thanks. Ian Barron says, do you think the drivers should help rebuild their cars if they cause the damage to the car? Yes, I do, definitely. Look at rally drivers changing the wheels and the spark plugs and everything else. And I think Formula One drivers should be doing exactly the same thing. There's a nice little clip, actually, quite sure where I saw it, of Lando serving the coffee to Fernando in the McLaren Honda days, as Lando was still just a McLaren junior driver. Quite right too. You know, I always remember Bertrand Schaefer going very well at Macau one year with Nick Heidfeld. Then after the race, after practice, Nick Heidfeld was there sweeping the floor of the garage. Mega. That's what you should be doing. Ian Barron, you never see Peter Wilson and Adrian Newey in the same room. Spooky. Peter Wilson? Not sure about that one. Creative expression, Dion, absolutely. Yeah. How Formula One has treated the Andretti is a direct slap in the face of one of the great American ambassadors of the sport. Unacceptable, totally. This is from Arnab Das. Do you think Jackie Stewart would have won any championships if Jim Clark hadn't died and continued in Formula One? Would have been an interesting fight. Yeah, I'm not convinced Jimmy would have raced after 68, actually. I think he might have retired at the end of 68. He was certainly talking about it with Colin Chapman. And I think, from Graham Gall, I heard this, and he knew Jimmy pretty well, that Jimmy and Colin were thinking of buying the Beagle aircraft company and running that together. And Jimmy was pretty keen on that idea. But it only got that far. Having said that, Jimmy was well in tune with the new era. And don't forget, he embraced the cigarette advertising era, gold leaf. And he did the livery change with Alan McCall at Levin in the beginning of 68, just over a weekend. 1 minute was green and yellow, next minute it was red, white and gold. That was Jimmy and Alan McCall did that. He had he tried the rear spoiler on the back of the Lotus 49 because that's what he had on the Volstead Ford at Riverside in 67. And he put that on. He loved the idea of aerodynamics. And he'd commissioned or discussed with Colin about the Lotus 58 Formula 2 car having a second brake pedal so that he could start left foot braking. Even though he had a manual shift, he wanted a second brake pedal. That just shows how far Jimmy ahead was. So with all those things, plus the turbines at Indy, he probably he loved all that technology and wanted to see what it was like purely out of his curiosity. And so he may have, but then when all the wings started failing in 69, he may well have thought, I've had enough here and left. So I don't think he impinged on Jackie's championships is what I'm getting to say. Jackie's first championship was 69 and then 71, 73. So I think Jimmy by then probably would have been winding down. Matt Alford. I remember Grand Prix International. I used to get it every month. Loved it. They even used to cover the World Powerboat Championship. Then it just disappeared. Yeah, and it was Bernard Assay was the photography. Eric Batt, a very good friend of mine, very good French journalist, was one of the key writers. Manu Zarini was involved as well. And Eric, not that well, I don't think, at the moment, so very best wishes to him. Brendan Farahani says, Peter, if you were to work in Formula One now, which team would you choose and which role would you choose? Thank you. What a nice question to think that I'd even be capable of answering it. It's a good question. I think probably Red Bull now because they've lost Adrian. Everybody's sort of a bit down on them and there's not so much going on. And I just think it'd be a good time to be at Red Bull rebuilding and forging new relationships and letting it sort of grow organically again. Even if they lost the Red Bull money, it'd be quite fun to be there with Christian and keeping that team right up there and getting the good people again and having them win races. I'm a great fan of joining teams when they're down or on the way out or small or whatever, rather than going to the the glamorous places with too many people shouting and screaming. So it would probably be Red Bull. Maybe the Red Bull B team in that case, something like that. Not because of the Red Bull money, as I say, even if they lost, I think it'd be more interesting to go to somewhere like VCarb, if that's what we're going to call them now. If Red Bull did pull out and they had to find their own money, I'd quite like that challenge of being there with them. And then I'd have two young guys with no money at all driving the cars, with a massive amount of talent, and very keen to learn and to listen. Windwave says the Yankees via Liberty have already done immeasurable damage to the sport. Really? You think that? Well, everybody says how wonderful they are, and Netflix and everything else. Not being a Netflix subscriber, I can't really comment on that, but anyway. Jack Jackson. Is there anything Red Bull Racing can do to convince the fans 22 and 23 cars were legal? Would winding back those seasons be a bridge too far for the governing body? Was anybody saying they were illegal? I don't think they were they? I don't think they were. I think, some Abu Dhabi 21 was a bit odd, wasn't it? Well, it wasn't odd, it was a terrible thing. But illegality? What are you talking about? Flexi wings? Bud Yeti says, I was today years old when I learned that Mr. Windsor is an Oz. Yeah. Well, I'm not actually an Oz. I was actually born in England. Went out to Sydney on the SS Orchides from Tilbury Docks. About a 2.5 month trip via the Bay of Biscay, Gibraltar, Aden, and Perth, and then Sydney. David Elghammer says, wow, I've stayed at that Buenos Aires Sheraton and ate the most incredible steakhouse next door. Each steak got their own hibachi tableside to keep it warm. Brilliant city. Wow, that's good news, isn't it? Yeah, it's a great hotel. Well, there you go. Always think of Ken Tyrrell when you go there. By the way, speaking of something making you think of something else, Jerry Rafferty, Baker Street. That is the song that Tommy Byrne introduced me to. Gave me a little tape cassette with various bits, and that was it. He said, "Oh, Peter, you got to listen to this one. Got to listen to this one," and that was it. So whenever I think of that, over here, Baker Street, I always think of Tommy Byrne. I said Steely Dan. Steely Dan was Stefan Johansson. He discovered Steely Dan, long before anybody else. So we're going back to the GT4 thing. So Suja says, so that means there's some merit in setting up a prestigious endurance race in India and getting us around one on the SRO championships, market it and get the grandstands full. Well, no, because I don't think the business model for putting on an SRO race is based on having full grandstands or great marketing. I don't think you'll ever succeed with that. I think you'll only succeed, as I say, if you get 35 unbelievably wealthy, very fast, athletic drivers who can fund the whole thing. That's how you need to do it. Okay, thank you. I'm going to do that. Yeah, creative expression. No worries. We all love your stream. We understand when there are difficulties. Just love your insights. Thank you very much. So kind. People are so kind. I thought they'd be saying, "Oh, Peter, what's going on with this? Why did it go down yet again?" It's actually gone quite well, this stream, in terms of technology, hasn't it? We're still live. Thanks, Peter. So much for all your thoughts today. Yeah, we're nearly at the end, aren't we? Because Dexter's sort of walking around now looking like he's saying, "Come on, Dad, time for a walk." Neil Grimm says, I really enjoyed all your videos, Peter. Start watching Formula 1 in 76. I nearly walked away from Formula 1 after 21. Lewis didn't. And in support, I stayed watching and attending races when I can. Yes, a man with racing blood in his veins, for sure. Umar Siddiqui, Peter, Formula 1 should hire you as a... Does that mean AA, Alcoholics Anonymous advisor, based on the James Hunt comments, or just an advisor? Well, I have to say, I have a lot of time for Stefano Domenicali, and I do a chat to him periodically. And I love coming up with creative ideas that I know nobody will ever adopt. It just annoys them. What does COTA stand for? It stands for Circuit of the Americas. There you go. And that was because in its inception, they always realized that a lot of their potential money and spectator stuff was going to come from below the United States, Mexico, basically. So the Americas. And there you go. There you go. So everybody's answered that question. Hi, Peter. Enjoyed your discussion, says Ronnie Way, thoroughly every time. With engine penalties looming, how do you see the final 6 races? Well, as far as I know, in my count, Red Bull are slightly ahead of the game, aren't they? Because they've already taken some penalties, Spa. So that might be a good thing. I think, if McLaren have to take one, they'll probably do it in Mexico, I would imagine. And so they're, maybe by then, if Merck have to do something, maybe Red Bull are in reasonable shape there. But I wouldn't put any store on that. They all seem pretty reliable, don't they, in general? So there you go. So Great Expression says, good point on the engineers. I do like how you took my question further as far as driver engineers. Where would you rate Bruce McLaren? Yeah, of course. I would put him up there with Jack Brabham and Dan Gurney as engineer drivers. I said Jack because he's the only one that won a world championship. But of course, Dan and Bruce won Grand Prix with their own cars as well. In Dan's case, the car was called an Eagle rather than a Gurney, but that doesn't matter. How would I rate Bruce? Well, he is unique in the true sense of the word, because he did things his own way, even though he was kind of a protege of Jack Brabham at Cooper. But he did things his own way, and he did them beautifully, with wonderful taste. He was a great guy, very easy to get on with. And when I was a kid in Australia, with the green Speedwell bike that my dad gave me for Christmas one year, when it was super hot, as you can imagine, and I had this track road course round where we lived, and I had my helmet and my goggles and my mask sometimes. I always pretended I was Bruce McLaren, because I just loved the way he looked in the Cooper and the way the Cooper was as a Grand Prix car. And I loved Bruce's attitude and general. I'd never heard him speak, or really, I'd never seen him at that point, but just looking at pictures of him in the magazine, I loved the sound of his name and everything. I just loved everything about Bruce McLaren, and nothing ever disappointed me about Bruce. He was just, he was quick. He was a quick driver, and he was very sharp. I mean, even when he was in that Cooper, doing the 62 probably Terratonga, when he put all the fuel in just one side of the car and beat Sterling Moss. Pretty cool thing to do. Sterling was a bit nonplussed by it all. Bruce was a quick driver too. I really, there's a great book, his autobiography, his completely untouched, just called From the Cockpit, Bruce McLaren. I counsel everybody to read it, because it's just a simple, lovely book about his life getting into Formula One. It goes up to about 1964, and it's wonderful. Yeah. How do I rate Bruce McLaren? One of the all-time wonderful people ever to have walked this planet. RP Brook, hi Peter, sorry for your loss. Thank you very much. Would Lotus still exist on the grid if Colin Chapman had not passed away so early? What was the impact of losing Chapman? Well, a lot of people would say, massive impact, and look, they disappeared relatively soon afterwards. But Chapman was kind of losing the plot in the last couple of years anyway. And I remember when Carlos was at Fiorano testing for Ferrari on the day that Colin Chapman wanted to sign his contract for Lotus for 79. So Carlos delegated me to go to the Lotus factory and do that with Colin. We'd kind of gone through all the fine print of the contract by then, so it was just a question of me signing on behalf of Carlos. And I was in Colin's huge office, massive, beautiful office, lovely wooden desk, lovely big chair, and massive office, beautiful glass windows, and overlooking the lawns at Ketteringham Hall. And at one point, Colin said, "Oh no, Peter, come around here. Just go through. I want you to go through these 3 things here. Just read through these. These are additional things. You can phone Carlos if you like. I'll leave you for 10 minutes. You know, make yourself at home. Sit at my desk. Do whatever you like. Use the phone." So I sat down at Colin's desk, and I was reading through this stuff, and I looked across to. There was a notebook on the desk. Everything else was very clear. There was nothing else. It was just a notebook, and there was one word in Colin's handwriting, because I knew his handwriting well, in pencil, and it just said DeLorean. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. John DeLorean, wonder why he's got that written there. And of course, he went on to do that deal with DeLorean. And in many ways, that was the downfall of the last years of Colin. And I remember Hazel saying, you know, Colin at the end, he just got very influenced by people with a lot of money. David Team, DeLorean, talking about money and the Irish EU money and all the rest of it. And I think that was a function of Colin never really getting his just desserts or rewards for everything he had achieved. And you could say, well, that's his own fault. That's his own making. Well, was it? Because 65, he won the Formula One World Championship, the Indianapolis 500, and he was building the Lotus Elan, the Lotus Cortina, and the Lotus 7 road cars, and the Tasman Series he won, and the French Formula 2 Championship. And he didn't get a knighthood. Think of that. Claire Williams got her, got a, you know, whatever she got, OB, MB, I don't know. Colin got something, but it wasn't a knighthood. And so he was never really acclaimed in the way that he should have been, in my opinion. I mean, Sir Ron Dennis, what's wrong with Sir Colin Chapman? And I think it wasn't so much that slight. It was that there was nothing on which to build in terms of all that success, because simultaneously in America, the Ralph Nader thing started, and the Elan's production for the American market was massively curtailed. And then there was a big squabble with Ford about who would get the Ford, big money Ford Le Mans contract. It actually went to sort of Lola rather than Lotus. And that's why Colin had done the Lotus 40, Lotus 30, Lotus 40, was to try to get Ford over the bridge, even though he won Indy with them, to do the Le Mans thing. And that didn't happen. And that annoyed him. And then the Lotus thing with the Cosworth DFV, you know, won the championship. That was all his idea and creativity with Keith Duckworth. And yet he then had to give the engine to everybody else. And so, you know, Colin, I don't know, maybe it was his own making, but I just think no wonder he was influenced towards the end by all this glitter and bling, because it was never there when he should have got it as his just desserts. So I think he would have, I don't think he would have had much. And the Lotus 88 actually was what really finished it, because Colin's response to low ride heights was to build a car with twin chassis, which basically fulfilled the regulation when it was stationary, but when it was moving, it was a proper car with suspension. And great idea, and actually was totally legal in every letter of the regulation, and yet eventually it got thrown out and wasn't allowed to race. And I think Colin then really felt embittered by Formula One and the rule book and the politics that were building up, conspiring against him. Yeah. Sujith, speaking of Indian motorsport, have you been following the Indian Formula 4 races? Young Indian drivers mixing it with Kiwis and Aussies and winning. I haven't, but I'm pleased to hear it, that that's really successful. I keep in touch a little bit with my mate Peter Thompson over there in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, and what he's doing out there as well. There's so much going on. It's almost impossible to keep up with it all, isn't it? As well as reading all the normal news and everything and trying to keep up with that. Mikkels, Alan, I'm going to have to make this the last one, guys. It's been going for quite a long time, and I've got to get moving. Hi, Peter. You briefly mentioned Jack Brabham. With your connection to life in Australia, do you have any stories of the Jack you could share with us? Be the man, his driving, his engineering. Yeah. I did several interviews with Jack. The last was at the site of the Esso garage that Phil Kerr built with Jack in Ewell on the way to Chessington, and it subsequently is now a jet garage. Doesn't look quite the same, but I remember sitting out the back there with Jack, chatting away about his early days at Cooper and then at Brabham. And I suppose in terms of stories, I would say how much of it was Jack. just Jack getting his hands dirty, Jack putting a Climax engine in the back of a Ford Zephyr and driving it up the M1 to Coventry to get it rebuilt in time to get back to Silverstone the next day, or Jack realizing that Cooper were going to have a problem with the gear release on this particular ZF gearbox and going over to an engineering mate at Volkswagen and realizing that if they use this very simple piece from the VW gearbox that it would solve that problem. It was all this hands-on Jack stuff, and it's a wonderful time. You know, we had a question earlier about, you know, should drivers get their hands dirty? Yeah, I mean, if you said to Jack Brabham, do you think racing drivers should get their hands dirty? He would say, well, do you think my hands were ever clean? And so it goes on. And Jack wasn't a fiddler. He was absolutely rock solid engineering brain, which was perfectly in harmony with that of Ron Toronak, who translated a lot of Jack's ideas, and equally Ron had ideas of his own as well. And Jack knew how to drive a racing car as well. I suppose the funniest story was when the end of 69, or towards the end of 69, when it was clear that Matra were pulling out of Formula One, that Ken Tyrrell was shopping around for a car for Jackie Stewart for 1970 and rang the Brabham factory during the lunch break. It was about 12:30 to speak to Ron Toronak about potentially buying a Brabham BT33, the new car, for Jackie Stewart to drive with the Cosworth engine. And Jack picked up the phone and he said, oh, this is Ken here. Oh, g'day Ken, how you doing, mate? Yeah. Well, I'm just phoning, Jack, to see whether you might be in a position to sell a car to me for next year for Jackie Stewart and probably Francois Sever. At which point Jack said, oh, sorry, mate, no, we're not doing any customer cars. No, ain't going to happen. Sorry, yeah, I'd like to help out, Ken. Yeah, ain't not going to happen. Of course, when Ron Toronak found out about that, he went absolutely ballistic because he would have been delighted to have sold a car to Ken Tyrrell. And Jackie probably would have been super quick in it, of course. But Jack, the last thing Jack wanted was Jackie Stewart in another Brabham, so he put him off immediately. Jack was like that. You know, Frank Maddich, Repco was Repco built the Buick V8 based Formula One engine that became the Brabham Repco engine that won the World Championship in 66 and 67, and with Denny Hulme. But the first real Repco contact was Frank Maddich. He was the guy that discovered how good Repco were, and he got some cams made by Repco for the 63 Tasman series, 63, 64 Tasman series, or beginning of 64, and he was really quick. And Jack came out with his car, the Brabham Climax, and it was quick, but Pukekohe, first race New Zealand, Frank blasted past him on the straight. So Jack's wondering what on earth has Maddich got in the back of his Brabham, and found out, of course, about the Repco thing. And then literally behind Frank's back said, right, from now on, you do these cams for me. You do not do any more cams for Frank Maddich. And Frank told me that, maybe there's some, not 100% truth in it, but I'm sure there's a lot of truth in it. Jack was a hard man, and he wanted to make, he wasn't particularly, he never cheated or anything like that, but he's just a hard man. He wanted to make his life as simple as possible. So yeah, good man. So I think we've done everything now, guys, and I'd just like to thank everybody, A, for their support and lovely words, very kind, B, for being on this live stream today. I hope it's quite good, isn't it? Because we're getting a lot of different parts of the world coming in. I kind of do live streams when I have the time to do them, which sounds a bit arrogant, but kind of the way I have to do it. And so it's been really good. So big thanks. Also to Jetcraft, to Track Ninja, and of course to OEM Exclusive for their support of this channel, without whom we wouldn't be able to do these live streams. So it's brilliant to have their support as ever, and your support too, as enthusiasts and fans very much like myself. Before I go, just let me put up here the Pirelli compounds for Austin. You can see 3 from the bottom there. They're right in the middle of the range. The only significance there really is to look at the last time we had that, which is what Spa looks like. And at Spa, Red Bull weren't bad, were they? Mercedes were good. I think that's what happened there. So maybe it's a Mercedes, good omen for Mercedes, that we have that combination for Austin. Anyway, we'll see. So there we go. Thank you so much for watching and for being with me on the live stream. I'll be back with the 3 videos from Austin. Just what I'm thinking of, the reason I hesitated slightly there is because my mum's funeral is the Monday after Mexico, and Jack's playing in a golf tournament here in Spain on the Sunday. And so in order to get everything right, we're going to have to rush straight from the golf to the airport, fly into England, and hopefully get there in time to watch the Mexican Grand Prix live and do a video afterwards. Maybe a bit ropey because it'll probably be from a Premier Inn or whatever. So just warning you, the Mexico race, bear with me on that one. But anyway, everything else should be okay. So I look forward to seeing you a bit later in this week as we do the Austin videos. Thanks for watching. Take care.